Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for December 16th, 2017, 8th year of Cheongi 10th month and the 29th day. Coming to the end of the month on the heavenly calendar. Last day will be tomorrow. And the 11th month will start on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
That's the lunar calendar, right?
No. Don't say lunar calendar.
No? Heavenly
calendar.
Heavenly
yes.
calendar, okay.
Which is supported by the lunar calendar and the solar calendar in Abel and Cain positions, according to Father.
Okay.
Yes. Because actually the Korean traditional calendar, they call it the lunar calendar, but actually it's not a lunar calendar, it's a lunar solar calendar.
So it's like a third calendar?
It's a lunar solar calendar.
So how do the days work then?
Well,
If
so in other words, a strictly lunar calendar is like what I think the Islamic calendar, I think, is a strictly lunar calendar.
Okay.
Where you don't care what the sun is doing.
Okay.
You're only worried about the moon.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But the lunar solar calendar makes adjustments from time to time in order to bring the calendar in line with the sun.
That's why you explained that one time. There was
Yes.
a lost month. You
A
have to,
13th month.
skip a month.
A 13th month.
Okay.
By the way,
Yeah.
this 13th month also existed in Western history.
Really?
Yes, during the time of Rome. Yes, and it was actually right now in the West and mostly worldwide. Mm-hmm. The standard is the Gregorian calendar.
Right.
Before that was the Julian calendar.
Okay.
Before the Julian calendar, all right,
Okay.
there was a calendar that was a lunar solar calendar. And it was actually Julius Caesar who reformed that to create the Julian calendar. And the problem that they had was that, see, if you have a 13th month every now and then,
Okay.
someone has to decide when that month is going to be.
Right.
All right? And apparently in Rome, some people would say, well, I want the month to be in a certain time so that my political career, my political office can be extended a month.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And apparently there was some corruption involved in that.
That sounds very believable.
So anyway, now though, that 13th month, which occurs 9 times out of 17 years, is set according to observations by the astrological observatories of each individual country. Yes. So the Chinese lunar calendar, lunar solar calendar. All right. People say, "Oh, Chinese New Year, Chinese New Year," but sometimes there's a little bit of difference because of if you're talking about Japan, Korea, China, even the U.S. If the U.S. were to use a lunar calendar, it would be a day or two off, maybe sometimes.
Okay.
Because of the difference in times and a difference of, you're observing the moon and as the Earth rotates and matching that with the time, is this Tuesday or Wednesday? So maybe the full moon occurs on a Tuesday in one place or on a Wednesday in another place. So it can be a little bit different. Yes,
a little differently in each country.
Yes, which is why this year, when there was a 13th month,
right.
In Korea, the 5th month was repeated.
Okay.
China, the 6th month was repeated. Because of that difference.
I see. Okay.
All right. So we have much to learn about that.
What
would
it be over here if we were doing it? Which month?
I have no idea. We go by, at least right now, we go by the by Father's tradition, and Father's tradition. It is set by the lunar calendar, which acts in the able position to support the heavenly calendar, is the lunar calendar according to what is observed by the Korean government's national observatory.
Okay.
Yes. And actually you can go online to that observatory site and they will tell you what day today is on the lunar calendar on there.
Okay.
Anyway.
Very interesting.
Yes. So anyway, today is the next to the last day of the 10th month. There are only 30 days. There are no 31 days on the lunar calendar.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes. Sometimes there are 29, sometimes I think either 29 or 30. I'm not sure there's a 28-day month. So anyway, that the 10th month will end tomorrow. Let's go to the weather. It's 18 degrees and clear in the Cheonryung area this morning. And we'll have partly cloudy to mostly cloudy skies in the morning. Then partly during the day, it'll turn partly sunny and going up to 34 degrees. So the first time in about 3 days or so, we're going to peak above the freezing mark.
That'll be nice.
Yes. Getting down to 15 degrees tonight.
Now, safer on the roads.
Yeah, well, there's going to be more snow between, not today or tonight, but between Sunday and Monday. There will be snow, perhaps about an inch or less, about that. Seems to be a rather dry winter this year. Not getting as much snow as you would normally think. I don't know.
Really? My first winter here, so
I see.
Everything's new.
Ah,
You're saying that there's less snow now than normal?
That's my feeling. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any statistics, but I just feel that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that there's we're only getting maybe an inch at a time, whereas I think in some winters you can get 5 or 6 inches at a time, and then. But anyway, so we'll have that snow coming Sunday, Monday. So Monday morning.
I'm really curious about the road maintenance here, because normally my only reference point is living in New England, right? So whenever there's like 4 or 5 inches of snow in Boston, it just becomes gridlock because there's too much traffic. They can't get out and salt them, and they're not really ready for snowfall. But if you go up a little bit north into New Hampshire, there could be 2 feet of snow. And then everyone comes out and plows at night because all the guys are contracted to plow. They get it salted and sanded.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty much the way it works here.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty impressed by the way that they keep the roads clear here.
Although I had a little trouble last weekend, the first snow with my little Prius. It was quite icy there. And because here these roads are very deceptive, because you have big roads with grades, you kind of grade at a degree angle that way. And you're coming over the hill, you start to go down and you pick up speed. So, I had to be quite careful, and they weren't all that quick in getting the salt out there. But I suppose there's a lot of big roads here. So there's a lot to be done. I suppose it's very expensive to do that.
Well, your Prius, does it have 4-wheel drive?
No.
Does it have front-wheel drive?
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so. It's not too bad. I stayed on the roads.
Yeah. I can tell you about driving in a rear-wheel drive vehicle here, but anyway, we'll get into that later. It's not good news, I tell you. It is not good news. You need 4-wheel drive, or at least at a minimum front-wheel drive. Let's see. Let's now go to our Rimas in the Bible. I'm in the book of Jeremiah. Now, in this verse, in this passage, we're in chapter 42. And I'm going to start reading at verse 15. So, in this, the Babylonians have come and they've destroyed Jerusalem, and they've taken some people into captivity back to Babylonia. And there are some people who are saying, well, you know what, we better get out of here, because if we stay here, the Babylonians are going to kill us all or take us all into captivity. So I know, I have a good idea. Let's go to Egypt. And God is saying, that's not such a good idea. So let's see what he says. And now, therefore, hear the word of the Lord, ye remnant of Judah. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, if ye wholly set your faces to enter into Egypt, and go to sojourn there, then it shall come to pass that the sword which ye feared shall overtake you there in the land of Egypt. And the famine whereof ye were afraid shall follow close after you there in Egypt, and there ye shall die. So shall it be with all the men that set their faces to go into Egypt to sojourn there. They shall die by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence, and none of them shall remain or escape from the evil that I will bring upon them.
Wow. Okay.
Egypt is not such a good idea. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, is mine anger and my fury hath been poured forth upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so shall my fury be poured forth upon you when ye shall enter into Egypt. And ye shall be an execration, and an astonishment, and a curse, and a reproach, and ye shall see this place no more. The Lord hath said concerning you, O ye remnant of Judah, go ye not into Egypt. Know certainly that I have admonished you this day. For ye dissembled in your hearts when ye sent me unto the Lord your God, saying, Pray for us unto the Lord our God, and according unto all that the Lord our God shall say, so declare unto us, and we will do it. And now I have this day declared it to you, but ye have not obeyed the voice of the Lord your God, nor anything for which he hath sent me unto you. Now therefore know certainly that ye shall die by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence, in the place whither ye desire to go, and to sojourn. So these people, the people of Israel said, the remnant of Judah says to Jeremiah, ask God what we should do. Should we stay here or should we go to Egypt? So Jeremiah asked God. God said, don't go. And they said, we're going to go anyway. So God says, I'll kill all of you.
Why did they ask God?
So why ask him in the first place?
Don't we do that kind of thing a lot?
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah, he didn't really mean that kind of thing. But this is a very serious. This is a very serious verse, and I think it's actually telling us to stand your ground. Stand your ground.
Yes.
You know, when you are fighting for God and when you are fighting for what is right, you need to stand your ground. And this actually relates to an article that I'll be looking at a little bit later on about President Trump. Because when we are fighting for God's word, or God's cause, fighting for the providence, and the pressure builds against us, and there's a strong temptation to back down, compromise.
True.
Go to Egypt.
True. Looks good over in Egypt. Get more comfortable. Yes. Got cucumbers over there.
But God says that He will bring evil upon us. So He says, hey, you know, it's going to be worse for you, and I'll make sure it's worse for you if you go to Egypt.
I think God has a purpose behind that, obviously, because
yes.
Oftentimes people criticize God in this kind of verse and say, hey, what kind of God is that, visiting evil upon His children that are just trying to survive? He took them out to the wilderness there. Now they're having difficulty, and He's saying, well, don't go back to Egypt. Don't try to solve your own situation. Just stand your ground and believe in me.
Yes, and believe in God. So yeah, you know, and if they had stayed, some of them would have been killed, others would have been taken into captivity. But eventually God led them back to Jerusalem. I think that's the important thing. So after a certain period of captivity, they were led back there. But if they go to Egypt, those that went to Egypt, God says, hey, you know, I can't help you. You know, you're going away from the providence. You're going away from me. So you're on your own. So and in fact, not only are you on your own, I'm going to make sure you die.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, it's obviously so analogous to our own situation here.
How's that?
Yeah. Well, you know, crossing over the Delaware River is the same thing as crossing over the Jordan to me. And living over here is, of course, I'm kind of new here, so it is challenging. I mean, you got to slow down. See, I'm not a person that I have great difficulty slowing down and staying put. So if I review at my age now, if I review my own like providential course, I've gone to Egypt, back to Egypt several times.
But you survived.
I survived, and
praise God.
I think I'm just lucky. I think Kuchinin said that to me on Thursday night. He said, with your luck, Ted, you'll survive an attack from jihadis. We're talking about martyrdom.
I see.
So yeah, I think just by grace, really. But being here, you know, the analogy is, hey, we're with the second king. You know, we've committed ourselves. We've crossed over the River Jordan. We've left Egypt behind. So if we go back, all bets are off.
But you just mentioned about being with the second king. One of the things that, according to, I was looking at the, I'll admit, I was looking at the Cliff Notes for the book of Jeremiah, and according to this person who wrote these Cliff Notes, all right, one of Jeremiah's objectives was to tell people that just because you've got the temple doesn't mean that nothing bad will happen. Whereas he says that, I'm looking for this right now. So Jeremiah said, you know what, the temple is going to be destroyed. And he actually predicted prophesied the destruction of the temple. But Jeremiah was trying to tell people that even if the temple is destroyed, you can still relate to God. That because religion is not something that is just external. That even if we're in a foreign land such as Babylon, we'll still be able to relate to God. So I think it's important to keep in mind that we need to continually develop that internal relationship with God. Internal relationship with God. And I think that's something that we can do whether we're in Northeast Pennsylvania or whether we're in Japan or Korea or the UK or Europe or Russia or any place else. And it's that internal relationship that's going to bring us salvation or bring us into God's kingdom, bring us into God's kingdom.
That is really the key point, isn't it, Tim? I mean, we talk about specifically me physically crossing over in here. It doesn't mean the whole world of sanctuarians are going to cross over here in Northeast Pennsylvania, but the internal crossing over into Canaan is the offering. In fact, yesterday I had an interesting conversation with Robert Pickle. He kindly invited me over to his house for a cup of coffee. We're talking, and then the issue came up about offering. We're talking about Abraham's course and cutting the doves and pigeons. And he was sort of explaining the course of image and substance and then heart, a heart offering, and that at that time in the Old Testament, when the offerings were made, you cut the bird or the animal vertically and took the left side portion on the bottom and let all the blood drain out, and then took the right side and put it on top of the left side and let the blood drain down into the left side. So, meaning that letting the blood drain out means we're letting all the satanic blood drain out on the left side first, symbolically. Separating good and evil. Due to the fall, there has to be a separation of good and evil. The left side, let all the blood drain out, so all the evil blood drain out. And then the right side goes on top, and then the blood saturates the left side, symbolizing that the good blood is now saturating the left side, and then it all burns. Final point being that we, as human beings, must separate good and evil, and then take full 100% responsibility for our crime, our sin, and step into who we really are as sons and daughters of God. And that's kind of the internal destination of this. So my own experience in leaving, being pushed out, well, being like pushed out of Brazil when I was a missionary there, that was horrible. I remember the day when I was in the backyard of the house I built in Bonito, Brazil, and facing really a horrendous circumstance. And God clearly told me, don't leave here. Stay. But I told God, no, I have to go. And so off I went to the UK, as it was. And that ended up being a 14-year course in the wilderness. And if I had stayed in the moment, it felt impossible to stay. But clearly the voice of God was, don't leave. But I disobeyed God's voice at that time, went back into Egypt, and it did not it did not work out well, really. It did not work out well. I wasn't able to resolve things that I needed to resolve. So really, it's just to be here again for me on the heels of that experience is, in a way I have to rectify that, or I have to restore that. So sometimes I'm over there sitting in my hermitage over there alone, and I'm just sitting there with God or with my Bible or whatever, and a lot of it is just hey, just stay, slow down, stay.
Okay.
But it's easy for me to flee. You get in a car, you're gone.
Sure.
One day I might flee. Then you know what happened. I hope not.
Please don't go. Please follow God. Well, let's go to our Cheonsongyong Rima. I'm on page 1100 in the Cheonsongyong, and this is the book on etiquette and ceremonies. Let's see, it was a book, that's book 7, and let's see which chapter I'm on. This is chapter 4. In fact, this is the very end of that book, right before we go to the next book. Get this up here. Page 1100. I will be going to the highest position, to the heavenly throne, but not all of you will be able to come with me. Because you received the precious thing called the blessing, the door is open for you, but not all of you have the proper ceremonial robes to wear. Even if you have been invited to a feast, you cannot attend unless you have the proper clothing, can you? If you have been asked to be a groomsman at a wedding, can you go dressed as if you just finished working on the farm? You have to dress appropriately before you go. Only then will you be qualified to be welcomed into that environment. If not, you will be thrown out. They will yell at you, "Get out of here, you good for nothing." Similarly, not everyone can come here. You cannot just come here unprepared. You must come dressed in holy robes. The next paragraph, a sacrificial offering represents the life and belief of the person making it. When you buy the goods for a sacrificial offering, do not try to get a discount, but give a little bit more. You should do the same when you buy material to make your holy robes. When we perform holy day ceremonies, there are certain dress codes that we publish. People are still not quite clear on when to wear a red tie. Some men are not quite clear on that. When to wear a red tie, when to wear a white tie. It's actually pretty simple if you think of it, because if there's a blessing, it's a red tie.
Okay.
If it's a songhwa, it's a white tie.
It's not too difficult.
Not too difficult, and yet anyway. But there are certain dress codes that Father established, and which we follow, which we're trying to follow here, and it's important, I guess, that people follow, even though that's an external thing. And in the Book of Revelations talks about washing our robes and being dressed in white and things like this, and of course it's not just a matter of wearing certain things externally, but it's a matter of washing our hearts and purifying our hearts, and making sure that our hearts are in the right place, as you were just talking about, and that because the real offering is the offering of heart. That's the most advanced, or the most highest offering that we can make. So the robes, or the following the dress code, is kind of an external expression of that, isn't it?
Yes.
So, as Father says here, if you're going to go to a wedding, you can't just go there like you just came off the farm. If you're supposed to be standing there with the groom as one of his entourage, and everybody else is dressed in tuxedos, and and you're just, dressed in overalls, it's not so good. It's not so good. People are going to say, well, he says here they're going to kick you out. They're going to curse you and kick you out. But maybe they'll be a little bit more polite. But anyway, they will probably say, I don't think we need your services today.
Go change your clothes.
Thanks for coming, but I don't think this is going to work. So, but certainly but following that dress code externally, you may say, oh, it's just an external thing. The heart's what's important. But the external is a reflection of the internal.
It is.
It is. And the external is actually the Hyung Sang is the second Sung-sang, isn't it?
It is.
Yes. So that's why it's important for us to follow the etiquette that Father has established.
You tell a lot about a person by the clothes he wears.
Oh, my goodness.
You know that.
Anyway, I don't want to go there.
I like wearing the red shirt. I kind of like red,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the offset red to blue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of nice clothes, but this is a nice shirt.
Mm-hmm. It is.
My mom bought me this shirt.
Oh.
I was in Boston. I've been taking care of kind of over the past few months, so it kind of gives. I like the red is a bit. It's just a bit not aggressive, but it shows up, and then the blue is a bit subtle to offset the red. And maybe for my facial color is I tend to turn red.
Mm-hmm.
My cheeks go red if I'm working out or training. I get really red, and then people are concerned. Are you okay, Ted? Yeah, I'm okay. I just turned red, and now my hair is kind of gray. So color coordinated harmoniously, and that might actually set a better platform for people to look at me and listen to what I say, whether it's good or bad. Hopefully, it's something good that benefits other people. But yeah, so it's a bit of an attitude and a platform, which is pleasing. It's pleasing to the view.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's take a break now, and we'll start going through the news, and I'll get to that article that I feel that relates very much to the Rima that we had this morning from Jeremiah. Let's take a break now.
Hi there, folks, and look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casul with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that, it even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty, my God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. That's a cannon. That's a cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. Pretty much on target. Massive repo.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th of 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady here, in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyung Jin Moon. And I want to recall, first of all, before I go to this article, that Bo Hee-pak wrote an autobiography. It was actually a 2-volume autobiography.
Wow.
I think he's the only person I know of who has written a 2-volume
Never heard of such a thing.
autobiography. Yes. Well, you know, it takes him 5 minutes to say hello.
That's true.
If you ever heard him speak.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wrote a 2-volume autobiography. And, of course, Bo Hee-pak was one of the 36 couples, still is. Or no, he was, actually, no longer is. And he worked very closely with True Father, was his translator from... during the Yankee Stadium, even Madison Square Garden in 1974, Yankee Stadium and Washington Monument rallies in 76, and worked very closely with them as a translator many other times before and after that. And I'm not sure if the exact date that this happened, but anyway, if you go to the first volume of his 2-volume autobiography,
Okay.
he relates a story of how True Father met President Richard Nixon in the Oval Office during the Watergate scandal. Not exactly sure when this would have taken place, but either end of 73 or beginning of 74, probably, somewhere around there. And if you remember, during the Watergate scandal, there was a big issue over certain tapes.
Right.
Because everything that had been said in the Oval Office had been recorded on tape, which is what we used to use in those days.
Like physical tape, just one
right,
cassette tape or something.
Well, a lot of cassette tapes.
Okay.
Yes, and magnetic tape we used to use in those days. And the impeachment committee, or the House the committee that was deciding on whether to impeach the president, was demanding that the White House release those tapes. And eventually, President Nixon did release those tapes, and I think they're a matter of public record now. And so eventually, I think, I believe Richard Nixon, he was about to be impeached, I guess, when he resigned. And but anyway, this very much reminds. Well, I was reminded of this when I read the Remo and Jeremiah, because Father wanted Nixon to fight.
Yeah.
And when he met Nixon in the Oval Office, he told Nixon to fight. And Bo Hee-pak was present in the meeting, he says, and as the translator. And according to Bo Hee-pak, Father told Richard Nixon to call a news conference and gather all the White House press corps on the lawn of the White House and put those tapes in a pile in front of the reporters and set fire to them. This is what Bo Hee-pak says Father told Nixon to do. Now, Father is the returning Christ. He's the returning Jesus. He is so when he speaks, he is speaking the word of God, just as Jeremiah was speaking the word of God to the people of Judah at that time. But eventually, Nixon went to Egypt.
Yeah, he did.
So anyway, this is so now Patrick Buchanan, who was a close aide to Nixon at that time, has written a column, and this was published yesterday, I think, yesterday or the day before. And he's comparing Nixon's situation to Trump's situation, because now people are calling for Trump to be impeached. And Buchanan says, unlike Nixon, Trump will not go quietly.
Right.
All right. So Buchanan says, Trump ain't going to Egypt.
No.
That's why I love it. And let me read Buchanan's column. On August 9th, 1974, Richard Nixon bowed to the inevitability of impeachment and conviction by a Democratic Senate and resigned. The prospect of such an end for Donald Trump has this city drooling. Yet comparing Russiagate and Watergate, history is not likely to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. First, the underlying crime in Watergate, a break-in to wiretap offices of the DNC, had been traced within 48 hours to the committee to re-elect the president. In Russiagate, the underlying crime, that is the collusion of Trump's campaign with the Kremlin to hack into the emails of the DNC, has, after 18 months of investigating, still not been established. Campaign manager Paul Manafort has been indicted, but for financial crimes committed long before he enlisted with Trump. Mm-hmm. General Michael Flynn has pleaded guilty to lying about phone calls he made to Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, but only after Trump had been elected and Flynn had been named National Security Advisor. Mm-hmm. Flynn asked Kislyak to help in blocking or postponing a Security Council resolution denouncing Israel, and to tell Vladimir Putin not to go ballistic over President Obama's expulsion of 35 Russian diplomats. Mm-hmm. That is what security advisors do. Mm-hmm. Why Flynn let himself be ensnared in a perjury trap when he had to know his calls were recorded is puzzling. Second, it is said Trump obstructed justice when he fired FBI Director James Comey for refusing to cut slack for Flynn. But even Comey admits Trump acted within his authority. And Comey had usurped the authority of the Justice Department prosecutors when he announced in July 2016 that Hillary Clinton ought not to be prosecuted for having been extremely careless in transmitting security secrets over her private email server. We now know that the first draft of Comey's statement described Clinton as grossly negligent, the precise statute language for an indictment. We also now know that helping to edit Comey's first draft to soften its impact was Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. His wife, Jill McCabe, a candidate for state senate in Virginia, received $467,000 in campaign contributions from the PAC of Clinton bundler Terry McAuliffe. Comey has also admitted he leaked to the New York Times details of a one-on-one with Trump to trigger the naming of a special counsel to go after Trump. And that assignment somehow fell to Comey's predecessor, friend, and confidant, Robert Mueller. Mueller swiftly hired half a dozen prosecutorial bulldogs who had been Clinton contributors, and Andrew Weissman, a Trump hater who had congratulated Acting Attorney General Sally Yates for refusing to carry out Trump's travel ban. FBI official Peter Strzok had to be removed from the Mueller probe for hatred of Trump manifest in text to his FBI lady friend. Strzok was also involved in the investigation of Clinton's email server and is said to have been the one who persuaded Comey to tone down his language about her misconduct and let Hillary walk. In Mueller's tenure, still no Trump tie to the hacking of the DNC has been found, but a connection between Hillary's campaign and Russian spies to find dirt and to smear and destroy Trump and his campaign has been fairly well established. By June 2016, the Clinton campaign and DNC had begun shoveling millions of dollars to the Perkins Coie law firm, which had hired the Oppo research firm Fusion GPS to go dirt diving on Trump. Fusion contacted ex-British MI6 spy Christopher Steele, who had ties to former KGB and FSB intelligence agents in Russia. They began to feed Steele, who fed Fusion, which fed the U.S. anti-Trump media with the alleged dirty deeds of Trump in Moscow hotels. While the truth of the dirty dossier has never been established, Comey's FBI rose like a hungry trout on learning of its contents. There are credible allegations Comey's FBI sought to hire Steele and use the dirt in his dossier to broaden the investigation of Trump, and that its contents were also used to justify FISA warrants on Trump and his people. This week, we learned that the Justice Department Bruce Orr had contacts with Fusion during the campaign, while his wife actually worked at Fusion investigating Trump. This thing is starting to stink. Is the Trump investigation the rotten fruit of a poisoned tree? Is Mueller's dump Trump team investigating the wrong campaign? There are other reasons to believe Trump may survive the deep state media controversy to break his presidency, overturn his mandate, and reinstate a discredited establishment. Trump has Fox News and fighting congressmen behind him, and the mainstream media are deeply distrusted and widely detested, and there is no Democratic House to impeach him or Democratic Senate to convict him. Moreover, Trump is not Nixon, who, like Charles I, accepted his fate and let the executioner's sword fall with dignity. If Trump goes, one imagines he will not go quietly. In the word of the great Jerry Lee Lewis, there's going to be a whole lot of shaking
going on.
I don't know why I quoted Jerry Lee Lewis at the end there. It was
because Jerry Lee Lewis went to Britain with his 14-year-old wife and got, back in the 60s or something, and that was a big scandal, because he had a 14-year-old wife right up in the hotel room with his 14-year-old wife, right? But the real point of this story is the M6 agent.
MI6?
There's always a Brit. There's always a secret Brit involved in nefarious deeds.
Christopher Steele.
Yeah. That was the dirty dossier of the eating in the hotel room?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me started on... I feel a bit like the king right now. Don't get me started on the UK.
My point is that Trump, we can expect, will fight, even if things get rough, unlike Nixon. Father felt that Nixon would not have been impeached.
Yeah.
If he had stayed and fought. I mean, it looked bad, It looked bad. The House was clearly going to impeach him. And once he got impeached, the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and they would, externally, it looked 100% certain that he was going to be impeached, that he would have to leave office.
But,
convicted.
Relatively speaking to what's going on now with Hillary Clinton and the FBI, it's like, there was a question, I think, at the Watergate time, whether or not Nixon even knew about the break-in at Watergate. I don't think he did. It was like, wasn't it G. Gordon Liddy or someone who was involved in that? But I mean, comparatively, Tim, I mean, there's so much evidence of against Hillary Clinton. It's kind of like there's so much that it's kind of reversing on itself and saying, well, there's just too much. We know Hillary's corrupt. We know they're totally corrupt. But anyway, they always get off. So why don't we just get back to business and just focus on Trump? I mean, but the difference is now, like you say, there's Sean Hannity, there's Tucker Carlson, there's a few congressmen. Was it Jim Jordan the other day? There's a few voices that are stronger now than during the Watergate era. If I recall, there was the whole lionization of the Washington Post and Carl Bernstein and Robert Woodward.
They're still making money off of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Carl Bernstein is still going around.
Yes, he is,
showing his face, and then wants to do the same thing with Trump. So,
yes.
No, Trump's going to stand his ground, and the deep state's going down. The evil kingdoms are going down, Tim.
Okay,
just
good.
axe cooching him. They're going down.
All right. Let's take a short break, and we'll come back with the tax cuts. The Republicans have come up with their tax cut plan, and we'll see what's in it, and we'll try to decipher a little bit. It's not so easy, but we'll look at it. All right? See you in a minute.
folks. And look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casul with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that, it even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty, my God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. That's a cannon. That's a cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. That's our target. Oh boy! Massive recoil.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th, 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady here for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung. And the Republican Party, well, you know, the House and Senate each passed their own versions of the tax cuts, with the Democrats, of course, all voting against anything that the Republicans might, you know, if the Republicans vote for the sun to come up in the east tomorrow, the Democrats will vote against it.
So not even one defector.
Not even one. Yes.
There's no Southern Democrat.
No. But anyway, so the Republicans are basically running the show right now because the Democrats are just on strike, basically, just on strike. So so the House and Senate got together and had a committee that would iron out differences between the two bills, and so that the two houses of Congress could pass the same bill with the same language, exactly the same language, which would then go to the president for his signature. And that's what they did yesterday. They finished that yesterday.
That's great.
They announced it, and not only that, it looks like they have the votes to pass it, because a couple of Republican senators were a little bit skeptical, but they've come on board now. They're falling in line.
Okay.
And so things look clear now for this tax bill to be passed by both the House and the Senate. The House is going to vote on it on Tuesday because all appropriations bills have to be voted on in the House first, and then the Senate will follow. And if all goes well, then the bill will go to President Trump, and he has said that he wanted to sign this before Christmas, and it looks like he's going to get his wish.
Wow.
So let's look at what's in it. Let's read, this is the CNBC article I'm going to be seeing here. Republicans on Friday released their final proposal to overhaul the American tax system, which would chop taxes for corporations, trim rates for individuals, and tweak tax deductions. The House and Senate GOP hope to pass the sweeping measure by the middle of the next week, hitting a year-end target. The House will vote on the plan on Tuesday. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a Republican of California, said in a statement. Republicans argue that cuts contained in the bill will spark business investment, hiring, and wage growth. And by the way, it's not just the Republicans that are saying this. Now the New York Fed is saying that the fourth quarter, the U.S. economy, we'll get into that a little bit later, but is growing at a rate, annualized rate for just the fourth quarter, but annualized rate of 4%. You know, when
Trump predicted all this.
Well, he planned for it, yeah. And the economists who were up in arms against it. They said that's irresponsible. The U.S. economy will never, ever, 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 ever grow at more than at the absolute maximum 3.0%. Annual. Right?
But you know, if you
wait, let's not wait. Whoa! What's all that?
Sounds like one of those drug ads, Tim. You see?
Yes. So anyway,
there's a lot of those on telly.
Let's go with this though. Let's continue with this. Democrats call the plan a giveaway to corporations at the expense of the middle class, expressing concerns about the $1 trillion or more it is projected to add to the federal budget deficit over a decade. Gee, this is news. Democrats are concerned about the deficit. That's news. Stop the presses.
How many trillion did Obama take on?
With two skeptical Republican senators falling in line Friday, the GOP appears to have the support to push the bill through next week on a party line vote. Here are some of the provisions the bill contains, according to a Republican summary. So this is a Republican summary, right? Okay. So the proposal would maintain 7 individual income tax brackets at slightly different rates, 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37. The top rate would fall from the current 39.6. The bill would scrap the personal exemption, but increase the standard deduction to slightly less than double its current level. It would go to $12,000 for an individual or $24,000 for a family. Now, it drops the personal exemption, that's true, but it also increases the child tax credit. The child tax credit is being doubled to $2,000 per child from $1,000. And exemption and credit are very different things.
Right.
If you've ever filled out your own taxes, an exemption is what you take from your income and subtract from your income before you calculate the tax. Right. A credit is what you subtract after you've calculated the tax. So it's a very, very different thing. So we have to, and also the
credit is dollar for dollar. I mean, the credit oftentimes is just a gift.
Yeah.
You know, that's supporting families and, working class families. That it's very good.
Well, and also when I look at the rates, all right, when you look at the rates, how the rates, as I say, is still the same number of brackets. But for example, the 10% rate currently goes from 0 to $9,525, $9,525. And that 10% rate is the ceiling of the 10% rate is being increased from $9,500 to $19,000.
That's very good.
So a lot more people will be people who have been paying 12%. Many of them will now be paying 10% if they're have the same.
Right.
And it's actually the tax bracket. People say, "Oh, if you make this amount of money, you're in this bracket." But actually, it's not how much money you make; it's your taxable income that determines your bracket. So just applying, "Oh, I make this amount a year. I make $50,000 a year, so therefore I'm in this bracket." It doesn't work that way.
A lot of cash-based businesses are going to be earning exactly $9,250.
Perhaps so.
But I mean, that's very good for the working class because the freedom of the economy, the fact, like the King talks about.
But let me get through these brackets first, right?
Okay,
before we go to the the 12% rate stops at $38,000, but it's going up to $77,000. And the 22% rate until now has stopped at $82,000, but it's going up to $165,000. So I think many people are going to find themselves going to a lower bracket. So that's one thing
huge.
that media seems not to be pointing out that I just noticed, and I think that's going to happen. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in regard to activity in creation of small businesses, cash-based businesses opening up a little salon, a hairdressing salon, baking goods, like
and in those cases, when the sort of the pass-through corporation, in other words, where a person declares their business income on their own individual income tax return, you're going to be able to exempt or deduct 20% of the business income.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a good thing for small businesses.
Right.
Yes.
And so the
ahead.
thing is, when you're starting out, you don't want to have a lot of paperwork. So this goes to show how Trump is the working class billionaire, right? He knows this about people that are trying to make it working hard. So you raise the standard deduction high, so people don't have to bother with working as sole proprietors or whatever. They don't need to bother with itemized deductions. They don't need to hire an accountant. They can just work. They can eliminate or reduce their paperwork. They can be free to build those businesses, to use cash. It leaves it up to them how honest they want to be with their declarations or their exemptions, and it creates dynamism on that level. Because I can notice as in Brazil, for example, or any place that's highly regulated, it's very difficult to start up a small business, and you end up spending a lot of money up front to start a small business without ever earning a dollar. So, if America's unleashed like this, there's no economy in the world that's going to defeat America, ever. You know that, right?
We haven't, I know that. We haven't gotten to the most important, in my opinion, most important change of all.
Okay.
That is, the Obamacare individual mandate is eliminated.
Wow. That's huge, too.
That's huge. Some people call this the best civil rights legislation in decades. Now, let's look at that. I'm looking at another article here that focuses on the Obamacare mandate, but I'm going to skip over if I can. It also eliminates the tax penalty placed on Americans who don't buy medical insurance required by Barack Obama's Affordable Care Act. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has cautioned that this may lead to more Americans not buying insurance policies, which would then contribute to premium hikes for those who do. Well, that's kind of a common sense thing, but the point is, though, that people now have a choice. They're not paying a fine or a penalty, which the Supreme Court, for some reason, says is not a tax. The White House said in a statement that by lowering tax rates, simplifying the rigid and burdensome tax code, and repealing the failed tax on lower and middle-income households known as the Obamacare individual mandate, this legislation will grow our economy, raise wages, and promote economic competitiveness. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, said that China is already worried about this tax bill because they know it will make America more competitive and spur greater investment here in America. This legislation will bring real relief to the middle class by taking money out of Washington's pockets and putting it into theirs. Democrats were predictably sour on the legislation. California Senator Dianne Feinstein called the bill awful and, quote, one of the most irresponsible I've seen, unquote. In addition to driving up the deficit, it will increase health care premiums in the individual market by 10% each year, leaving 13 million more Americans without health insurance, and threaten to destroy a pristine section of the Alaskan wilderness. That's right. Is the Anwar drilling is going to be allowed as a result of this this bill. I'm surprised anyone can call this a tax reform bill with a straight face. She said this is nothing more than a huge tax cut for big corporations and the rich, paid for by the middle class. Well, this is Dianne Feinstein. But of course, one of the things that I think for the rich is going to be a problem or increase their taxes is that the mortgage interest deduction ends at $750,000 for the loan amount.
So that's been reduced a bit.
Yeah. So interest on anything above $750,000 will not be deductible. So that means that people who live in higher priced homes will be deducting less of their mortgage interest.
So how is this benefiting the rich, according to Feinstein?
Yeah, it's not. My point is that it's not benefiting the rich. It's actually because it's making them pay more taxes, it would seem. But how this applies to each individual's tax return, I think, is going to have to be something we'll have to answer on April 15th. Because I don't know that we can really figure all the ins and outs unless you go through your last year's taxes and see how it worked there.
I always itemized deductions in the past when I was doing as a sole proprietor because I drove so much. And, you get quite a generous deduction if you do mileage deduction on that.
Yes.
But the fact that he's raising the standard deduction like that means that, you don't have to, keep your miles for the whole year, for example.
Well, maybe, yeah. So depending on how much, because you're able to deduct 20% of the business income anyway.
Yeah.
But, most people, if they have a mortgage and they're paying interest on a mortgage, and most people or many people will itemize. And then if you're tithing to your church, making donations to your church, that's another thing that people will itemize. And as you said, if you're a sole proprietor, then the mileage and other stuff, business deductions also come in. So each person is going to be different. We'll have to see. But now with the doubling of the standard deduction and the doubling of the child tax credit, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. And so the child tax credit is going to be available for people with much higher incomes as well.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The Democrats, they're feeling, as you use this term, they're feeling redundant. Do you know, to make someone redundant? You heard that term?
Well, their strategy was...
give them a pink slip?
Yeah.
We don't
their
need
strategy was
now.
to say, okay, Obama's going to fail, so let's just wait in the wings and wait for him to fail, and then we'll come in and save the day. Problem, Obama's not failing. This is the problem that they seem to have. If the economy and the growth in the economy until now, they've been saying, "Oh, thanks Obama," because they say that it's because of the budget that Obama put in place that that the economy is doing so well. But there's a limit to how long they can. 7 years from now, they're still going to be saying, "Oh, thanks Obama." Maybe not so much.
They just start saying,
but I don't know.
Clinton.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe Trump is being set up for a big crash in the economy. We don't know. Certainly the
or the Fed raised
difficulties.
Rates, did they not?
The Fed raised rates, but also said that they also acknowledged that the growth in the economy is real. And they actually increased their outlook for the economy from 2.1 to 2.8% growth. The New York Fed's 4.0% applies only to an annualized growth for the fourth quarter, so it's not the actual annual rate. But things are going well. It would seem. But the things that people are worried about are still there. The stock market is still highly overvalued, highly overvalued and still going up. The things that make people want to worry about the crash of the dollar are still there.
Right.
The Chinese are trying to undermine the dollar by telling people that they're going to buy oil. They're the largest importer of oil in the world, and they say we're going to buy your oil with our money, with the yuan, not with dollars. So that, and they're offering their suppliers the ability to change those yuan into gold. So that is obviously intent on undermining the petrodollar. And so the crash of the dollar is still as possible as it was yesterday. But in the short term, things seem to be going well. But we don't know when that cliff will come. And we just go, everything is smooth sailing until you just level field until you come to a cliff and then you fall off. Yeah. We don't know when that's going to come. So it's still a very, very dangerous situation. And this is, at least in the short term, going to increase the deficit. Well, even Republicans are saying, I think, $1.5 trillion over 10 years. But when you've already got $20 trillion deficit, $20 trillion in debt.
What comes after trillion? Gazillion?
No, quadrillion, actually.
Quadrillion.
Yes.
We're going to get there.
Yeah.
Someday.
Well, anyway, but maybe America can grow out of this problem. Maybe if Trump unleashes the economy, maybe America can grow out of it. Maybe.
I think so. The thing about Trump is that so different about Trump, he understands the psychology of money. And in his speech at Pensacola last week, he brought that up. He says, I understand the money thing. He says, and he dropped in a little line, you know, it's a psychological thing. So for Trump to be up or down is the same thing. He's experienced all this. You know, he's like $1 billion down in his in Atlantic City.
He's been bankrupt a couple of times.
Yeah, but he turned that around. So this is just the beginning with Trump. What's really going to be fun is when he starts renegotiating the $20 trillion debt down. That is going to be fun because he's going to sit there with the Chinese and the Japanese or whatever, just like he did with the bankers, and say, okay, we got to do something about this debt. Now, you guys need this from us. What are you going to give us back? And he'll cut off $5 trillion, $7 trillion.
You think so?
That is going to be fun to see.
All right. If that happens, it will definitely be fun. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with some other news, some economic news, but also some other not-so-good news, and when we come back on immigration. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th, 2017 still. Not 18 yet, 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Jin-moon. Well, before we go on to more serious news, I wanted to, I guess this is less serious.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I did try to stick my head in the microwave at home.
Okay.
You remember, yeah?
Yes.
Actually...
and you're still here?
I'm still here, but that microwave is actually quite small, right? I was going to bring it in as a demonstration, but actually...
I think those guys had a bigger microwave.
It was bigger, but I actually fit my head in this microwave, really, and it almost got stuck in there, Tim. Really, and I had a moment of panic. Because I left a little plate in there, you know?
All right.
Plate.
Okay.
And I understood the kid, you know?
You understand?
I
don't know if people. What was this last Saturday?
This was last Saturday. The guy,
last Saturday.
Yeah, you did it as a prank. The kid from the
UK.
Yeah.
Well, he also put cement in there, I think.
He put some plaster in there.
He
put a plastic bag over his head, stuck it in there, put plaster.
Yes, and they had to call the British version of 911.
Yeah. But he had a straw, so he was going to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to breathe, but then somehow the plaster hardened too quickly, so his head got stuck in there.
Yes.
But I had a moment of
which, of course, where we get the term blockhead from. But anyway,
this guy's blockhead, you know. But you're right. He must have had a bigger microwave.
Let's go to this week's story. A grandmother in North Carolina fought off armed robbers with her gun. North Carolina's Cabarrus County District Attorney's Office says that the grandma who shot and killed an attacker at Sarah's pet spa was justified in doing so. The grandma's name is Sarah Shu, and the incident occurred in November with the DA ruling on it on Friday. It took them some time, I guess, a month or so to make up their mind. According to WSOC-TV, Deshaun Tatum forcefully and unlawfully, in quotes, entered the spa and started attacking Shu's boyfriend. Her two grandchildren were present as well, and Shu feared for their safety. Tatum left after a heated verbal exchange, only to return with a group of individuals who were, quote, yelling expletives, unquote, at Shu. She called 911, and while she was talking to the dispatcher, a fight erupted between Tatum and Shu's boyfriend. Her two grandchildren were standing by her side when Tatum began moving toward her. The 911 dispatcher listened as Shu shot Tatum. This is the grandmother, shot Tatum. She then returned to the phone and said, I just shot one, and I'm going to shoot the rest of them."
Wow.
She then told the dispatcher, "They are going to get guns. You better hurry." The dispatcher assured her that officers were on the way, then asked if Tatum was hurt. Shu responded, "I shot him in the face. He's probably dead." The DA rules that Shu acted in self-defense and will face no charges. So this is why, especially, this is a very good example of how a gun is an equalizer.
Yeah.
I don't know how old this man was, Tatum was, but I think he was quite a bit younger than the grandmother, Shu, and she was in fear for her safety and for the safety of her two grandchildren who were with her, and so she took her gun and she shot him in the face, and it looks like she killed him. Shot and killed. Yes, it says shot and killed an attacker at a pet spa that they were visiting, a business that they were visiting.
Where did this take place, Tim?
In North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, once you get south of the Mason-Dixon line, these kind of things are
this would be
more permissible, more permissible.
Well, I think this would be, in my understanding, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice here, but I think this would be okay in Pennsylvania as well. I don't know about New York and New Jersey, but in Pennsylvania, I think that this would probably work out. As the law in Pennsylvania is that if you have a reasonable fear that you are in imminent danger of serious bodily harm or injury, death, or kidnapping or rape, then you are justified in defending yourself with a gun. Yeah. Or in this case, also this person had entered this business forcefully and unlawfully. That would be another possible justification for the use of deadly force. But anyway, I'm not a lawyer, not giving legal advice, but that's just gives people something to use to research the laws in their own communities. All right, let's.
It is quite unique, though, Tim. I mean, this is unique to America. You know, if that kind of thing happened in the UK, I mean, that's it. She's going to jail. No ifs, ands, buts about it. This is I don't imagine any other country in the world would really allow that as the USA does, and say you have a right to actually do that.
I don't know if any other. I mean, there are a lot of countries. There are about close to around 200 countries in the world. I don't know if none of them would allow this. Yeah, it'd be interesting to research if someone has the time to see if there's any other country. But certainly, in the United States, there is this natural right. In other words, God-given right to defend ourselves.
Right.
And so we believe that people in other countries also have the right. It's just that the governments and the laws of those countries are not allowing people to exercise that right.
That's right.
But the right still exists. And in Chunuguk as well, it would very clearly there would be this right. So this would work in Chunuguk. That grandmother would also get off probably in less time. Then DA probably would not have to take a month or so to make up his mind on this. Probably should be let off in a lot less time. I imagine how much anxiety she must have felt during this time when the DA was trying to make up its mind on what to do about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that worked for her.
Sounded like she gave the guy a chance. He came back the second time. They argued a bit.
Well, the first instance, there was no justification to shoot because there was just an argument. It's just a verbal argument. So there was no justification in the first instance. Right. But it sounds like, when he started coming toward her, anyway, we don't know all these circumstances, but in my impression, he went out, but when he was there first, maybe there was less of a justification, but when he came back and started moving toward her, maybe then there was a justification. Anyway, the DA looked at it and found that there was that she was justified in using deadly force. Let's move on now to immigration. Unfortunately, the illegal immigration is now increased. It was down, quite a bit when Trump first came in.
Right.
And he was elected on the promise to build a wall along the Mexican border, and that hasn't happened. And guess what? Now illegal immigration is up again,
right.
And it's almost basically at the Obama level now.
Nice.
Yes.
What's happening with the wall?
So I think they're prototypes. I think.
Isn't Mexico paying for the wall?
I haven't heard that. But the problem is that the Democrats are promising or giving people hope that they can get in and get an amnesty. And that may be behind the increase in the illegal immigration. The Democrats' draft DREAM Act amnesty would likely add as many chain migration foreigners to the United States population as are added by the total number of Americans who are born in 4 years' time.
They're just looking for votes.
Yes.
It's really the only way that the Democrats can survive is through immigration.
Yes. As House and Senate Republicans, Democrats, the big business lobby, the cheap labor industry, and the open borders lobby have teamed up to push an amnesty for potentially millions of illegal aliens who are enrolled and eligible for the President Obama-created Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that's DACA, program. The impact of the move would have on Americans would be likely unprecedented. So this is a program for people who were brought here by their parents when they were young. Under the current legal immigration system, immigrants who are given a pathway to the U.S. citizenship are eventually allowed to bring extended family members, children, their parents, siblings, and extended family members to the country. This process, which makes up more than 70% of the current legal immigration, is what's known as chain immigration. Research by the Migration Policy Institute reveals that under a DACA amnesty deal, between about 800,000 and 3.5 million illegal aliens would be eligible for legalization to permanently remain in the U.S. Of those, MPI notes that 1.5 million of the estimated 3.5 million would be allowed to obtain U.S. citizenship. According to Princeton University researchers Stacy Carr and Marta Tienda, newly naturalized Mexican immigrants in the U.S. bring an average of 6 foreign relatives with them. Therefore, should all 1.5 million amnestied illegal aliens bring 6 relatives each to the U.S., that would constitute a total chain migration of 9 million new foreign nationals entering the U.S. If the number of amnestied illegal aliens who gained a pathway to citizenship under an amnesty plan were to rise to the full 3.3 million, and if each brought in 3 to 6 foreign family members, the chain migration flow could range from 9.9 million to 19.8 million foreign nationals coming to the U.S. The chain migration flow triggered by a DACA amnesty, where an end to chain migration is not coupled with the plan, would be more than double the number of babies born in the U.S. every single year, which stands at about 4 million a year. Should a DACA amnesty trigger a chain migration flow of 19 million foreign nationals, it would be more than quadruple the number of American births every year. The chain migration of a DACA amnesty would potentially outpace the populations of American cities like New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston. Such a chain migration would boom the number of foreign-born residents in the U.S. to a historic high. Currently, the foreign-born population is already at historical levels, reaching 44 million this year, with no end in sight as legal immigration reductions to give relief to America's working and middle classes are stalled in Congress. Trump has previously stated that an amnesty deal for DACA illegal aliens would have to include an end on chain migration in order to stop surges of illegal immigration to the U.S., though it remains unclear how many Republicans would be willing to break from their big business donors to help pass a law to end chain migration. Most recently, a group of senators released legislation known as the SECURE, Secure Act, that would end chain migration, thus reducing legal immigration to 500,000 admissions a year to give relief to Americans, but couples the pro-American immigration reform with an amnesty for DACA illegal aliens. Nearly 120,000 foreign nationals have been allowed to enter the U.S. since 2005, despite coming from countries designated as state sponsors of terrorism, including Iran, Syria, Sudan, Breitbart News reported. In total, about 9.3 million foreign nationals have entered the U.S. since 2005 because of chain migration, making it the largest driver of legal immigration to the country. As Breitbart News reported, chain migration makes up more than 70% of all legal immigration, with every 2 immigrants bringing 7 foreign relatives with them.
Do you remember back in the late 70s when Father was had the campaign to have 30,000 members in America for those 2 years? And Father said at that time, I recall, that he can work a miracle in America with 30,000 new members. So that's 600 for each state. So imagine 19 million plus new voters for the Democrats and the effect politically that has on the United States of America. I mean, that's really what this is all about, Jim.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't realize, though, they're entering into Egypt, not Canaan. They need to stay put to build up Mexico.
That would be a good thing, yes.
See, in a way, in a way, they're expecting to enter into heaven by coming into the USA, but actually we're kind of creating Egypt with these immigration policies.
There's a Washington Times article about how the immigration levels have increased back to Obama era levels. Illegal immigration across the southwest border has surged back to Obama era levels, according to the latest data released Friday, that suggests the gains President Trump made early in his tenure have worn off. Nearly 40,000 illegal immigrants were nabbed attempting to jump the border in November, which was up about 12% compared to October, and more than twice the monthly numbers from March and April, when Mr. Trump touted his early accomplishments. Perhaps just as worrisome for officials is the rise in families traveling together, which surged to 45% last month, and unaccompanied minors traveling without parents, which rose 26% in November.
Unaccompanied minors.
Yeah, so kids coming across on their own.
Right.
Or, I don't know, kids, minors, I guess, is under 18. So these people are looking and, look, there's going to be a DACA amnesty. Let's get into the U.S. and take advantage of that amnesty.
Right.
That seems to be what's going on, at least for some people. Homeland Security said overall, things are still in an improvement over the worst years of President Obama. Under President Trump, illegal immigration has declined dramatically over the last year, said spokesman Tyler Q. Holton, but he said more needs to be done and said the action needs to come from Capitol Hill.
Where are they crossing over?
Well, this is the
Rio
south.
Grande?
This is talking about the southwest.
They're not coming over the Canadian border, are they?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm not sure how many
That was a
Canadians
joke,
are.
by the way. I mean, are there places like on the Arizona desert where it's just unsecured and they just walk over?
Yeah. Well, the Canadian border too is pretty open. It's undefended, but people are not using that border quite so much. The administration is working tirelessly to secure the border, enhance interior enforcement, and establish a merit-based immigration system. But we need Congress to act immediately to close immigration loopholes, fund the border wall, terminate outdated visa programs, and provide the necessary tools for DHS officials to carry out their mission, Mr. Holton said. I guess by outdated visa programs, he's referring one would be the lottery program, lottery, and other maybe some of these chain migration that Breitbart was talking about in the previous article. The 39,006 people caught in November included 29,086 caught by the Border Patrol and 9,920 who tried to come through official ports of entry without permission. The total is still less than 2015 or 2016, but is more than 2012, 2013, or 2014, signaling a return to Obama-era levels of illegal immigration on the border. Just last week, the Trump administration crowed over its gains, pointing to a nearly 30% decline in people being caught at the border compared to the previous year. But they did say they were, quote, very concerned, unquote, by the latest trends, which have been borne out in Friday's numbers. CBP officials said cartels have figured out how to exploit legal and policy loopholes in the U.S. to get illegal immigrants into the country and give them a chance to blend into the shadows. In addition to more migrants, border agents and officers are catching more opioids, heroin, and cocaine being smuggled from Mexico to the U.S.
So this is the problem with sanctuary cities, Tim.
Yep.
They know they're not going to get prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
We had that case with the Kate Steinle case where the guy was exonerated.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
In San Francisco, right?
That's right. He was found not guilty, even though he should have been deported, but he wasn't.
And 5 times he came back into the country.
Yes, and he wound up killing this young woman.
He said it was an accident, and the Glock went off just by dropping it. But actually, it's not possible for Glock to do that, apparently. But the whole thing...
many, I don't know if all, but many modern pistols do not go off just by dropping it.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're taught to, when we have a pistol, one of the safety rules that we're taught is don't try to catch a falling gun. Because if a gun falls off a table and you catch it, the danger of your making it go off, in other words, if by catching it, you may put a finger on the trigger and pull the trigger inadvertently, and make it go off that way. But if it just falls and hits the ground, most, I don't know all, but the most pistols manufactured today will not go off. So yeah, that's a problem. All right, let's take another break, and we'll be back in a minute or so with more news from a Choniku perspective.
fun shooting this Tommy gun today?
It's always fun shooting Tommy guns. This one especially. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
All polished and chromed up. It really looks like $1 million.
Yeah. Elliot Ness would have loved one of those.
Yeah, and it's available right now in your favorite dealer, and you go pick one up.
Yeah, just have him call your distributor.
I mean, the gun, was initially made way back when, back in the 27 is this one.
Yeah, model 27.
I was surprised by how quick it knocked down those plates.
Oh, 3.5 second run, under 3.5 second run, knocking down a plate right. 341.
I mean, the gun is heavy. It's about, what, 12, 14 pounds, especially with this drum, but it's surprising how quick you can go with it. It would actually make quite a good self-defense rifle at home.
If I climbed in somebody's window and they were aiming that at me, I think I'd get out of there real quick. So
that sounds about right to me.
Just the intimidation factor alone.
Fire!
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th, 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Chenukuk, Hyung Jin-moon. Let's look at some of the other headlines on Drudge this morning. Trump to remove climate change as national security threat. We'll look at that later on. Melania popularity climbs. Report entire family turns trans. Star Wars burnout. The Last Jedi Thursday night box office falls short of the last one.
Oh, really?
That's because we didn't go to see it.
I know it, Tim.
we made a promise to go see it.
You know.
We need to do that.
That's right.
Police called in after mob storms theater lobby over lack of sound.
Really?
Yeah, that's a crisis. Yeah. Showdown. President's lawyers to meet Mueller. The Buchanan's article. And then Clooney sets a Watergate for Netflix. The president doesn't rule out pardon for Flynn. House intel racing to complete probe. And then Thursday night football ratings tumble to a season low. Redskins tickets are now down to $6.
Really? Wow.
Weekend Brady versus Roethlisberger. Epic matchup. The two quarterbacks. A Democratic woman accused of sex harassment. Kaczynski files, and 9 more say prominent judge subjected them to inappropriate behavior. The cops say the jealous boyfriend set fire to a strip club where his girlfriend was dancing. Vicious winds to test crews battling California wildfire. Heading back into drought, so California is still burning.
Really?
Employees demand AI worker robots pay tax.
Well, they need to, Tim. They're earning money.
Health officials urge people to sleep at least arm's length away from cell phone.
What was that?
Health officials urge people to sleep at least an arm's length away from their cell phones.
So much radiation coming out of there.
Never carry in your pocket.
Wow.
Increased risk for brain cancer, low sperm count, headaches, impaired memory. Free-for-all at U.S. border reveals disturbing trend. Illegal crossings surge back to Obama levels. Republicans declare open season on Bannon.
Oh, really?
Newsom rises. Facebook admits it's bad for you. Twitter racial death threats against FCC chair after net neutrality repeal. Google censors results. The media's reign of error. Warren Beatty flop. Rules don't apply. Sparks $18 million lawsuit over losses. EU is clamping down on Bitcoin.
Oh, really? Okay. 2017
in review, disruption, despair, dumpster fires. Eminem comeback album, worst of career. Roseanne reboot, sets spring premiere date. And 99-year-old Marine fights off burglar. I wasn't scared. I was so damn mad.
99.
95. He's still young. Restaurant served cheese sticks with side of cocaine.
What?
2 swimmers in 24 hours attacked by sea lion at San Fran Beach. Noonan says Alabama teaches America a lesson. And next, Roy Moore in Arizona, Nevada. Vatican urged to drop celibacy rules and end secret confessions.
By who?
I will look at that later on. Lawyers sought donor cash for 2 Trump accusers. Yes, some of the people who are accusing Trump, their lawyers are trying to get money for them. At 86, which I'm sure they would have taken a cut themselves. At 86, Murdoch returns to his roots in news. Unhappy Kingdom, Disney Fox deal likely to cost 5,000 to 10,000 people their jobs. White House says the Western Wall has to be a part of Israel. A Palestinian shot before detonating a suicide belt.
Really?
Jews flee France over rising tide of anti-Semitism. Well, yeah, if you have more and more...
10 million Muslims there.
Yeah, well, sure. I can see that. Family finds hidden camera in Carnival cruise cabin. Investors most bearish since great financial crisis. As in the illegal immigration article there. Yes. So those are the, which one would you like to look at?
What's up with the Catholic
yeah, let's look at what's happening here
thing.
With the Catholic Church. This is a Wall Street Journal article, headlined, Australian report urges Vatican to reject celibacy, rethink secret confessions. Child sex abuse inquiry found tens of thousands of victims across many Australian institutions. Wow. The Catholic Church is the worst offender. Out of Sydney, the Australian investigation into decades of child sexual abuse involving tens of thousands of victims called for sweeping changes in the Catholic Church and other organizations, including making celibacy voluntary for clergy and forcing ministers to report abuse concerns that come to light through confession. The broad-ranging probe urged Australia's Catholic Church to request the Vatican make changes to canon law, including removing limits on the time in which the Church can take action on child sexual abuse cases, as well as removing a requirement to destroy documents relating to criminal cases in matters of morals. It recommended the government make it a criminal offense to fail to report knowledge or suspicions of abuse disclosed in a religious confession. The report said confession had, quote, contributed to both the occurrence of child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and to inadequate institutional responses to abuse, unquote. Quote, church leaders have viewed child sexual abuse as a sin to be dealt with through private absolution and penance rather than as a crime to be reported to police. The sacrament of reconciliation enabled perpetrators to resolve their sense of guilt without fear of being reported, unquote, it said. In response, Catholic Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher, warned against making changes to confession. He said focusing on something like confession is a distraction. Quote, any proposal to effectively stop the practice of confession in Australia would be a real hurt to all Catholics and Orthodox Christians, and I don't think it would help any young person, unquote, Archbishop Fisher told reporters. But the Catholic Bishops' Conference, a group of Australian bishops, said it would work with another organization of Catholic leaders to review the report and respond within months. The Vatican issued a response later in the day, calling the report the product of thorough efforts over the past several years, and saying it deserves to be studied seriously. The brief Vatican statement, which did not mention the confession or celibacy issues, said the Church was committed to the, quote, protection of all children and vulnerable adults, unquote, and to working in Australia for healing and justice for sex abuse victims and survivors. Many states require members of the clergy, among other professionals, to report child abuse. There are recommendations made by Australia's Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse were among dozens made in a 17-volume report released Friday. It was the conclusion to a 5-year inquiry into how organizations in the country managed and responded to allegations and instances of child abuse. Tens of thousands of children have been sexually abused in many Australian institutions, unquote, the report said. It is a national tragedy perpetrated over generations within within many of our most trusted institutions. It said abuse occurred in almost every type of institution, including sports clubs, schools, and religious organizations. It wasn't a case of a few rotten apples, it said, with some institutions having had multiple abusers who sexually abused multiple children. The commission accused society's major institutions of serious failings, exacerbated by a manifestly inadequate response. Launched in late 2012, a 6-person commission handled nearly 70,000 calls, letters, and emails, and made more than 2,000 referrals to authorities, including the police. In response to the Commission's preliminary reports, the government already agreed to develop a database to share decisions on background checks for people working with children around the country, and introduced reforms to stop registered child sex offenders from traveling overseas without permission, among other actions. The Commission's recommendations were directed at a number of institutions, but it said that, based on its findings, the greatest number of alleged perpetrators and abused children were in Catholic institutions. It said the power afforded to people in religious ministry and the misplaced trust of parents, combined with institutional culture, had created risks for children. It had alleged perpetrators often continued to have access to children even when religious leaders knew they posed a danger. This is a shameful past in which a prevailing culture of secrecy and self-protection led to unnecessary suffering for many victims and their families, said Archbishop Dennis Hart, president of the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference. The government of Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said Friday it would provide 52.1 million Australian dollars, or about 39.9 million US dollars, to support victims. It also said it would establish a task force to consider and coordinate Canberra's response to the final report's recommendations. What that commission has done has exposed a national tragedy, Mr. Turnbull said.
Just recalls Tim growing up in Boston, you know, from an Irish Catholic family. There was a big scandal a few years ago in Boston about the pedophile priest. It kind of broke it worldwide. But, you know, I can recall having an uncle who became homosexual. I mean, he was a very loving, wonderful uncle to us, you know, but he suffered. And, of course, he was an altar boy, and nothing ever came out personally or actually overtly about what may or may not have happened, but it was so pervasive in Boston, where the altar boys would be preyed upon by the priests. You know, and it's just so sad, really, to see the extent of it. I mean, the fact that it's all coming out now is a good thing. But, of course, Father blessed Archbishop Malingo, who was a Catholic priest, and Father set the standard to end celibacy in the Catholic Church. I noticed that in Boston also. Just one other point, that there is no secret confession in the Catholic churches in Woburn, Mass., where I'm from, anymore. If someone wants to do a confession, they have to get a private interview with a priest. So you did mention in that article that in the U.S. they've addressed this issue about reporting these crimes and not using the confessional as a means of expiating one's guilt without without fear of exposure. I mean, that's a bit of a sensitive issue, but it's shocking to me how pervasive all this is. You know, the fact that now all this sexual deviance, or our sexuality, is just being exposed, the sexuality of fallen humanity. So go ahead.
Let me just add that, reading that Wall Street Journal article we just read, maybe a lot of people felt the same way I did. Well, wait a second. What about George Pell?
Right.
This is an article about the Catholic Church in Australia, about child sexual abuse, and not mentioning George Pell. Right. Obviously, that article is incomplete. And so I did a little research here just now, and the New York Times article on the same issue does mention George Pell. So I just want to read those couple of paragraphs about George Pell just to fill out our information on this. The most damaging revelations, talking about the same Australian report, the most damaging revelations about child sexual abuse have centered on scandals in towns like Ballarat, the hometown of Cardinal George Pell, who this year became the highest-ranking Roman Catholic prelate to be formally charged with sexual offenses. In Ballarat, a police officer investigated a pedophile ring at local Catholic schools and said up to 30 victims had since committed suicide. Ooh. Wow. The charges brought in June against Cardinal Pell one of Pope Francis's top advisors, followed years of criticism that he had been overlooked and at worst covered up that he had at best overlooked and at worst covered up the widespread abuse of children by clergymen in Australia. So that's the update on Cardinal George Pell. I think he's still going through the judicial process there in Australia. Yeah. And he hasn't been convicted yet, but he's. But anyway, the New York Times points out
these guys do need to be convicted. I recall a couple of years ago, there's a Father Egan. I don't know if you remember this, about 20 odd years ago.
Yeah, I do remember the Boston situation. Yeah.
Yeah. What was interesting is he went to court and he never was remorseful, and he kind of had a silly grin on his face with the whole
because
court
after all, I've confessed it and God has forgiven me.
God has forgiven me.
Yeah. So what do the laws of man have to do with this? That's got this kind of an attitude. Yeah. So that's.
Yeah. So it's forgiveness, but the consequence of sin. But this guy was taken out in prison. He's murdered in prison.
Yeah, and that's what happens to because in prison there's a certain pecking order, and child abusers are at the very bottom. They're below the bottom, so they often get taken out in prison. Yes.
But I remember the victims going. You mentioned about the 30 suicide victims in Australia. These victims of Father Egan were coming out one by one, and they were just broken. They were all men in their 30s. They had married and then couldn't maintain their marriages. Just a litany of tragedy. The effect of sexual abuse in that way is the fact that the priest is an authority figure. He's like the source of God's love.
Yes.
The altar boy is serving the priest. He's completely trusting of the priest. So to be abused that way at that time, at that vulnerable time in life, is just so devastating. And then the fact that they had no recourse after the abuse. To rectify it, the abuse would continue. So imagine the young person going through the sense of guilt, self-accusation, is it right or wrong, the gender confusion. It's just absolutely devastating.
Now, talking about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, actually the Boston case, you had the Boston case.
Yeah.
But on a per capita basis, what's worse than Boston actually is what's been going on in Guam.
Really?
And we had an article on this a few months ago about their, and so I'm just trying to get an update on that. And I see that in the last couple of days, former Catholic school teacher accused of sexual abuse, that's in the Guam Daily Post, Catholic school teacher accused of abusing students in the 90s. But there doesn't seem to be an article on the overall situation. I don't want stories on the trees. I want stories on the forest. But I don't see. But on a per capita basis, I think it's an ongoing situation there in Guam, where they're still investigating many people, I think.
Why Guam?
Why Guam?
Yeah.
Because Guam, the Catholic Church it's an island, so it's more cut off from the rest of the world, I guess. And the Catholic leadership had a very strong position there, over the strong hold on the people there, and so it's this ability to cover it up and to, as the Australian Commission said, I think this whole thing of a confession, first of all, in a secret confession, so they know that they can confess to a priest, and the priest will not report it to the police, at least in Australia. Apparently in the U.S. that's not true. That's good. But at least in Australia, you have this situation where they can be sure that the priest will cover it up for them. It's part of the doctrine of the church to cover up sins, to cover up crimes like this. And then they can be absolved by God simply by doing a few Hail Marys or something. I don't know what kind of penance they do.
A few Our Fathers as well.
So that really, as you say, in the meantime, people are being destroyed. People are committing suicide. People are having destroyed lives, but they don't look at that. So Father said it's time for the priests to get married, nuns and priests to get married, and some of our brothers and sisters in the Unification Church are former priests and nuns. I know some couples like that, and But really, the king has said that the Catholic Church is a fake Christianity, and that it has completely gone away from Christianity. And it, if people taking the communion wine in Catholic Mass, taking the wine in Catholic Mass, that wine will have the same effect as committing the fall.
I heard that.
Yes, that's what he has said. So anyway, so that's that for the Catholic Church.
But the original idea of confession is that you would, with sincere repentance, you would confess your sins to the priest, who is going to keep confidence in front of God, and then you made a sincere confession and repentance to cleanse your soul. Originally it's is to keep the relationship between yourself and God. That's what you're doing through confession. You're repairing that, and I can recall when I went to confession, and we were required to go to confession, but it was always a little bit scary, before you go into confession, because, you had the priest in the box, right? And then you had the red light and the green light switching off. So red light, someone's in the confession. Then someone comes out of the confessional. You hear the window slide open. There's a wooden window. Then, the person comes out. It turns green, it's your turn. So you go there, you confess. And I must say, you confess whatever. You examine your own conscience and you confess what you feel you've done wrong, and then you go and do. The priest would say, say a little prayer, do the, bless you like that. Go say, as you say, 10 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers. Okay. So then you get out, you go to the altar, you kneel down, and you say you do your penance, right? But you do feel cleaner. You do go through that little bit of fear and guilt confronting God, and that's a good thing for a Christian to do. The fact that it's become so corrupt now and it's become so deviant is just. It's just beyond the pale, because the thing is that people who are faithful, as the king has said as well, there's so many millions and hundreds of millions of Catholics in the world that are faithful, good people, and they're sincerely want to keep these sacraments in sincerity to have a life of faith. But the fact that the entire organization is satanic and deviant and controlled by the devil, then they are trapped in a way. And I think it's also part of the age we're living in, the fact that the Father has gone to the spiritual world, the second king has emerged, and all the satanic kingdoms of the world are under judgment. All of them, the British monarchy, the Vatican, right down the list. It's not a question of relative good and evil anymore. So everything needs to come down, Tim. The satanic kingdoms need to come down.
Yep.
Our own satanic kingdoms need to come down. Whatever satanic kingdoms we have within ourselves. We were talking this a little bit with Robert yesterday as well about idols, idolatry. You look at the Family Fed, for example, okay? I recall when I was down in Brazil early this year, just visiting the local Christian churches, and I was witnessing about the second king and explaining to people what happened after Father died, and how the second king, honorably kept his mission, and he's doing this, and I'm with him. And they said, "Oh, that's good. You're with him. I understand your faith." And one young evangelical pastor looked at me and said, "The problem with that happened in your church is idolatry."
Mm.
And it's one of those things just kind of struck me upside the head. And it was really true. It's like, if you think of all the members who joined our church and had their own experience with Father or personal relationship with God, and then as things go on, it's like putting the picture on the wall of, Father like this, or the Han Mother like this, or you create an illusion within your own self that you're worshiping, which is not God, and that's idolatry. And then the point came up. Robert mentioned to me the actual first 4 commandments. The first 4 are about idolatry and the relationship with God. So God decries idolatry, and we're just living in an idolatrous world. We have to be vigilant about our own idols.
An organization is one of those idols.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, we confronted that issue, profoundly here in the sanctuary.
Yes.
Which is healthy.
Yes, and I know through a couple of experiences that Father was willing to sacrifice the organization for the benefit of God's providence. That in those cases the Korean leaders around him did not go along with that. Mm-hmm. They wanted to keep the organization, and they finally they did keep the organization.
Yeah.
Was one of those instances was the hometown providence. I remember when Father announced the hometown providence, there was a great deal of commotion among the Korean leaders who said, how are we going to maintain the organization if Father sends everybody back to their hometown?
Right. You're not.
You're not.
You go back to your hometown too.
Yeah. And another time was when Bo Hee-pak attended Kim Il-sung's funeral. In North Korea.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, there was a friction between, at that time, Bo Hee-pak was president of the Sega Times newspaper. And Father sent him to attend Kim Il-sung's funeral. Because, when Father visited North Korea in 1991, he and Kim Il-sung sort of said they were going to treat each other as brothers from now on.
Yeah.
And so Kim Il-sung died, and of course, Father he couldn't go himself, so he wanted to send his representative, so he sent to Bo Hee-pak. And then when Bo Hee-pak came out, there was a great deal of controversy in South Korea because the South Korean government had specifically forbidden any South Korean from attending that funeral.
Okay.
And a couple of leftists had, and they were, being arrested and punished, so stuff like that. And so... So also the South Korean government started coming after Bo Hee-pak, and he was not yet in the country. He was, so another man was running the Sega Times newspaper in his absence, and Father was in Alaska at that time, and Father instructed this man who was running the newspaper to have the newspaper fight the government on behalf of Bo Hee-pak. And this man didn't want to do that. And he said to Father, if we go up against the government, especially on an issue like North Korea, your entire foundation in Korea can be taken away. It can be destroyed.
Right.
The government could label the Unification Church as an anti-state organization. In South Korea, not so much now, but technically now too, I think, but in those days, there was a law that said that any organization that supports or praises the North Korean government is an anti-state organization. And being a member of such an organization was a punishment that would bring a jail sentence, and torture and all that. And so this man was saying to Father, if we do this Unification Church could be labeled an anti-state organization. But Father continued to insist that the Sega Times newspaper publish articles and editorials and op-ed pieces supporting Bo Hee-pak's visit to the funeral, and said, "Fight the government on this." And this man continued to refuse, and so Father said, "Well, come here to Alaska, come here, and let's talk about this one-to-one, face-to-face." And the man refused to go.
Really?
And in the end, the man continued to resist Father and did not execute his instruction. So, and this, kind of reminds me of the passage in Jeremiah that we had this morning again.
Yeah.
That externally, it would have been a foolish thing to do. Externally, the quite possibly because Korea then was still very authoritarian government, where the government could very easily destroy a newspaper in a day. Even a major newspaper. What would happen was that the government would call up the banks and would call up the advertisers and say, "Hey, cut off your relationship with that newspaper. And they did this earlier at times. And there was one newspaper that survived that, which still exists today, but it stood for what it thought was right, and it survived as a result of receiving donations from its readers. Readers had donated money because this newspaper was standing up against the government. So that newspaper sort of became a kind of a hero in the eyes of many people who wanted democracy in Korea. And a couple of times the Sega Times newspaper missed an opportunity to stand up for what was right, even at the expense of a possible destruction of not only it but also other parts of Father's foundation. Even in the early years of Sega Times, there was a time when, I think we were only a year or so old, I think, and our reporters came across a scoop, a scandal that involved a scandal that started in the Seoul municipal office, but appeared to go all the way to the president. And at first, at that time, Kwak Chung-han Kwak was president of Sega Times, and at first he says, "Oh, let's we're going to fight on this. Don't worry, we're going to fight on this." But then someone warned them, "You know what? If we fight on this, that's fine. The government, of course, could close the newspaper, but they may also close Ilhwa or other, Tongyil Industries or other economic foundation that father had in Korea at that time." And at that time, Chung Kwak again also backed away. He says, "Okay, well then let's not change my mind. Let's stop that." So, but of course, Ilhwa went bankrupt a few years later. So I mean, if we had lost Ilhwa at that time to an authoritarian government, as it turns out, we could have recovered it later on with damages, right? And also Tongyil Heavy Industries as well. Probably could have recovered it later on with damages, and we would have been a hero, and the church would have been a hero in the democratization movement in Korea.
Is that right?
Yes, it would have been that way. But when the chips were down, the people around Father has absolute faith that the divine principle is true, the truth will make you free, that God is alive, and that God will not forsake you as long as you do not forsake Him. And as long as you're with God, you're protected. This is Father's absolute faith, and it is just an amazing to see the examples of the faith that he had in this. But the people around Father, the 36 couples, Bohi Pak, and this man who fought Father, and Chung Kwak, these people around Father did not have that faith.
No,
they did not have that faith. And I think that is the faith that we are learning today, where, all right, the second king was denied his inheritance, and he was pushed out. He was pushed out of the organization and pushed away from. They tried to push him away from Father, but actually, what turns out to be true is that they pushed Father out.
That's right.
They pushed Father out, and now they are going up against Father. And Father's rebuilding that foundation.
I know it's incredible, Tim. You come here, and like I said, I'm relatively new here, right? It's not easy to be here. It's not easy to be around things that are happening here, around with the second king. I mean, you look around externally here on Sunday morning, there's a lot of empty seats, and people might be watching online. I remember a couple of years ago, I was over in England watching the Sunday services, and I'd always notice, all the empty seats, and there's just a few people, the same faces and all that, wonderful faces. But, the internal element of attendance, again, of self-denial, of the fact that we are disciples, that's what Jesus talked about in the Gospel of John. And, which I recently went through with my brother Jacob as an HSU class. It was so enlightening to me personally to see how Jesus, before he went to the cross, emphasized, I am in the Father and the Father is in me. I am in you and you are in me. The same course that I go, you will go. If they hate me, they're going to hate you. Then he appeared after the resurrection and told them they're going to go the way of the cross, except for the beloved disciple John. And what is it to you, Peter, if he doesn't go to the cross and you do? Again, pointing out that when we receive the order of God, we're in the position of judgment. And we look at our elder leaders that, of course, we loved and respected, and we worked for years with Reverend Kwok, Bohi Pak, and admire them in many ways for their work and their faith during the time they were with Father. But then at the moment will come for all of us when we must choose who we will be. And, we face that every day here. So we are, you and I and all of us here, we're with the second king. But there's always the caveat of Judas. There's always the fact of Judas. And Jesus predicted there is a Judas here. So we have within ourselves the potential to betray. So we take all of these things as an object lesson, Like I told you, I'm out there at the Hermitage in Holly. I might flee one day. I might just go away for a few days for Christmas, in Boston, okay. But the point I'm making is that, this is vigilance. This is our life of faith. But what is really wonderful about the sanctuary for me personally is once I decided to step over that internally, okay, I'm going to commit myself to the second king. I don't know him that well, but I feel it's the right thing to do. Then God then reciprocates. God then becomes real and present and guides me in the remas step by step. And I'm sure you've experienced that too. So God becomes alive again, and then we have a chance to rebuild. And now we see what's happening now with the king getting ready to go to Switzerland, and more things going up, more and more high-level guests coming on the king's report. And we can see that Father's foundation is now being recouped, as you said. So although there are empty seats, that's good in a way because it protects us from the pretenders. It protects us from the people that are going to show up when things look good.
There are empty seats. There's still room for more.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, come on and join us.
There's still room for more. All right.
Where are you guys? Where's Mike Mickler? Where's Tyler Hendricks? Where's Mike Balcom? Where's Richard Busing? Where's Dan Pfefferman? Where are you guys? Stand up and be a man.
All right.
Stand up and be a man. Love Father. I'm calling you guys. I know you by name. I work with you.
While Dan Pfefferman contemplates that calling, we will take a break.
Come on, Big Dan. You're my elder brother.
We'll take a break and come back in a couple minutes with more news from a Tonyako perspective.
Sorry about that. I don't know what
Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. Just like a drum, I can hear
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th, 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady here for the second king of China, Hyung. And I'd like to look at a story now in the World Tribune, worldtribune.com. The headline is From J. Edgar Hoover to James Comey, How the FBI Morphed into a Proto-KGB.
Wow.
In the span of 16 years, liberal directors Robert Mueller and James Comey transformed the FBI from an illustrious crime-fighting organization to a politically correct retribution machine that is answerable to no one, intelligence and FBI sources say. Quote, once a bastion of conservative anti-communism under longtime director J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI has become one of the more liberal political agencies of government, and some critics say appears increasingly to operate outside normal constitutional controls. Bill Gertz wrote in a December 6th analysis for the Washington Free Beacon. Under Mueller, who headed the agency from 2001 to 2013, and Comey, who succeeded Mueller and served as director until he was fired by President Donald Trump in May, the FBI has come to regard itself as a power center that the White House can't control, critics say. People are finally tumbling to the realization that this FBI has become a proto-KGB, a former senior intelligence official with extensive experience in counterintelligence told Gertz. We're in a constitutional crisis. These guys are playing out a silent coup against an elected official. That elected official is Trump, who Special Counsel Mueller and his team of mostly liberal prosecutors are said to be going after full throttle in retaliation for the president's daring to criticize the FBI. Mueller, Comey, and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein are going to make Trump pay for having dissed the Bureau, the former official said. According to Gertz's analysis, FBI sources, agents, and other personnel have been told unequivocally that they are not to have any dealings with the White House, and that doing so risks career-ending measures. The agency's current brass also seem to ignore the fact that the Constitution makes clear the FBI, as an executive branch agency, is ultimately responsible to the president. For years, under both Mueller and Comey, the FBI has also stonewalled congressional overseers. Quote, even routine requests for FBI documents and information have been rejected or ignored, and congressional overseers have not taken action to force the FBI to comply, unquote, Gertz wrote. The lack of congressional oversight and administration controls have left the FBI with enormous power and little accountability. Trump took aim at the FBI in tweets and comments this week. This article was written 10 days or so ago. Tainted? No. Very dishonest? FBI agents' role in Clinton probe under review, led Clinton email probe. Fox and Friends Clinton money going to wife of another FBI agent in charge, Trump tweeted on December 3rd. After years of Comey, with the foamy and dishonest Clinton investigation and more, running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters, worst in history. But fear not, we will bring it back to greatness, the president also declared. On December 6th, Mueller appeared to counter Trump's comments by leaking word to the special counsel has issued subpoenas for bank records at Deutsche Bank related to Trump and members of his family. Under President Barack Obama, quote, the FBI suffered a string of failures that critics blame on the FBI being pressured by liberal, politically correct policies that emphasized diversity and multiculturalism of its workforce over competence and results, unquote, Gertz wrote. The FBI's shift to the left on Obama's watch was, quote, evident whenever a U.S.-based terror attack, or other major crime takes place and the FBI, seemingly ever on the lookout for ways to protect its reputation, puts out word to pro-FBI news reporters that the problem is less serious than it is, unquote, Gertz wrote. That reminds me, I'm going to continue with the article in a minute.
Yeah.
Las Vegas.
Right.
They're not telling us what happened in Las Vegas.
Right, it's going under the radar screen, hasn't it?
You know, we not only have we don't even have enough information to ask questions. The only question is what happened in Las Vegas. The FBI is clearly covering up what happened in Las Vegas. Anyway, that I just was
there's the helicopters.
Crossed my mind.
There's the helicopters. There's the second shooter.
Let's not go into that right now. But I was just saying, it illustrates this point here. That was the case after several major Islamic terror attacks in the United States when Bureau officials initially put out word the attacks had no link to terrorism. Similarly, when North Korea conducted a major cyber attack against Sony Pictures Entertainment in 2014, the FBI, heading the probe, at first said there was no foreign involvement in the hack. In another case of note, Gertz wrote, last June, after an anti-Trump gunman and Senator Bernie Sanders supporter shot a congressman and 4 other people in Alexandria, Virginia, the FBI sought to minimize the politics of the incident. The agent running the investigation, Tim Slater, told reporters the shooting was spontaneous. Despite evidence, the shooter had a list of targeted members of Congress.
Wow.
John Guandolo, a former FBI counterterrorism agent, criticized the FBI for yielding to pressure from Muslim groups and watering down its training of agents by limiting references to Islam and jihad, or holy war. I'm not aware of any time in the FBI's history when FBI leadership was so incapable of performing their duties as they are today, Guandolo said. The FBI's inability or lack of desire to aggressively pursue obvious major threats to the Republic, the Marxist and Islamic movements, for instance, is stunning and frightening. Guandolo said the FBI is working with our Islamic enemy. FBI is working with our Islamic enemy, according to this former FBI counterterrorism agent. He's saying that on the record. In fact, all 3 of the Muslim organizations listed on the FBI's website as outreach partners are Muslim Brotherhood organizations, he said.
Wow.
An FBI source told Gertz that Comey's politically charged handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation upset many of the FBI's agents who saw it as a disheartening indication of political bias in favor of Clinton. National security strategist Angelo Codevilla attributed much of the FBI's problem to careerism and an out-of-control bureaucracy. I'm afraid that the explanation is all too simple. Bureaucrats, employees of the large organizations, figure out on which side their bread is going to be buttered, Codevilla said. They learn to think, feel, and do what advances their careers. So under the 20th Constitution, there is no FBI. There is no National Investigative Agency. So the answer here, get rid of the FBI. Let's get rid of the FBI and empower the people.
Right.
Peace police, peace military. This is the FBI is a part of the executive branch, and everyone in the executive branch is supposed to be accountable to the president.
Right.
But the FBI is no longer accountable to the president. If they can't be, and Trump is saying he's going to reform it. It would be an extreme to say let's get rid of the FBI. But if you can't reform it, you're going to have to get rid of it. Going to have to get rid of it.
He's talking about hiring private intelligence groups to protect himself from the deep state.
Yeah, there was a talk of his creating a private CIA. That would be gathering foreign information, but of course, the Secret Service is in charge of protecting the president, and they're not part of the FBI. They're actually part of the FBI is part of the Justice Department. The Secret Service is part of the Treasury Department. So they're, but you know, they suffer from similar situations maybe. But the FBI especially now has you know, if we have an organization like the FBI say, oh, the government, the president criticizes us, well, let's make him pay for that. Let's bring him down.
Right.
And they're clearly politically biased, and as it says here, has become one of the most. They used to be the strongest anti-communism organization in America. Used to be in the American government, and now they're working with groups that are part of the Muslim Brotherhood.
But this is like the tipping point now. I was listening to Hannity the other day, and you know Hannity's getting like stronger and stronger and stronger, and he's calling out Jeff Sessions to step up now and appoint a special prosecutor in the Clinton case, the Uranium One deal, fusion, whatever, Mueller, and just what you said, Tim. The FBI is part of the Justice Department, which is under the president.
Yes.
The president actually has the right to fire Mueller if he wants to.
Well, he has that right, but politically, it would be perhaps not the best thing to do.
Politically not, but you remember when, this is all from Obama, really all the way back to Clinton, really, the whole, and immigration. You're strategizing to politicize everything, and it's like a cancer. It just pervades into everything. So if we don't stand up to it now, Tim, I mean, we deserve what we get. We can just build bunkers out here in the Poconos if we want to. It's going to be cold in there in the winter. Jeff Sessions is the Attorney General of the United States. If he doesn't do anything now, Trump ought to replace him, whether he's compromised or not. If someone's compromised personally, okay, you stand up anyway, you're going to be compromised. The exposure comes out, come what may.
So stand with God.
I mean, look, no one has no dirt in their past.
Don't go to Egypt.
What the heck?
Don't go to Egypt. Stand with God.
We're either going to stand with God or not. Exactly. Yes. We're either going to stand with God or we're going to flee to Egypt and eat cucumbers, which are not that great anyway.
Also on the WorldTribune.com, Clinton deal allowed removal of physical files, logs, Muslim engagement documents. Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and top aide Huma Abedin were allowed to remove electronic and physical records by claiming they were personal materials and unclassified non-record materials, according to State Department records obtained by a government watchdog group. The records obtained in a Freedom of Information Act requested by Judicial Watch also showed that Abedin was allowed to take 5 boxes of physical files out of the State Department that included records described as Muslim engagement documents.
Wow. This whole thing with the Muslim Brotherhood, the collapse of the Middle East, the death involved, even the decision to go to Iraq with Father begged George W. Bush not to go to Iraq.
He didn't beg, but he strongly warned him not to.
Strongly warned him. And I remember the same time the Pope John Paul at the time, met George W. Bush face to face, and everyone was, basically giving strong warnings to him not to go. And he did. We killed 200,000 people there. Then Hillary came on board, collapsed Libya, collapsed Syria, support the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt. Turkey now is radicalized with Erdogan. It's an absolute disaster, and well over 1 million people killed. All that blood is on American hands, Tim. What kind of moral posture do we have now in front of the world, hey?
Speaking of 1 million people, 1.1 million flee Venezuela. More would if they could afford the ticket.
They probably went to Brazil.
Although the socialist government of Nicolas Maduro has stopped publishing official numbers, at least 1.1 million people have fled Venezuela amid a devastating humanitarian crisis, according to officials in neighboring countries. The situation in Venezuela seems to worsen by the day, with severe shortages of food and medicine, runaway inflation, and one of the worst homicide rates in the world. Leaving was tough, but staying would have been tougher. Andrea Sequeira, 29, told USA Today. Sequeira fled to Peru with her husband Luis, 31, and 8-year-old son Fabian. We know lots of people who would like to get out of Venezuela but can't afford the ticket. Immigration agencies from Mexico to Argentina report huge increases in the numbers of Venezuelans arriving in their nations. Most of those leaving Venezuela at this point are heading to Latin American countries as they can't afford the airfare to the United States or fear being turned away due to President Donald Trump's immigration policies, analysts say. Peru introduced a special temporary visa in February for those fleeing the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Nearly 30,000 Venezuelans have applied for the visa, which includes a temporary work permit. Despite Venezuelan immigrants, desperate Venezuelan immigrants are looking for any possible way to support their families, said Guerenzon Gonzalez, who runs the Venezuelan Union in Peru. There's nothing to buy in the shops in Venezuela, now anyway. He said, here you can have a roof over your head and stable work, and very quickly after you arrive. The influx of Venezuelans has caused tensions in some Latin American countries. In Panama, the new arrivals are competing for jobs with the country's residents, and that has stoked nationalistic sentiment, said Harold Trincunas, an international security analyst at Stanford University who grew up in Venezuela. Panama responded by tightening its visa requirements. The Sequeirias told USA Today they arrived in Peru after a 6-day bus trip from their native Valencia, Venezuela's third largest city. They said they became desperate as their wages, Andrea's pay as a human resources coordinator and her husband's at the Empresas Polar, Venezuela's largest food and beverage company, became increasingly worthless. The worst thing is not being able to feed him, she said, nodding toward her son. We want to make friends and have a good life here, Andrea Succaria said. We would like to go back, but right now we are focused on just rebuilding our lives.
Yeah, that's so tragic. I mean, Father invested so much in Latin America.
Yeah.
When I was involved in the Providence there, Father said the victory in North America should now be flipped to South America. And we went there as UTS graduates in 1996 to go to 33 countries. We were supposed to work with the Washington Times and go to 33 countries. That never happened. We ended up being missionaries in 30 cities around the Jardine Project, which ultimately imploded. But Father made the condition to save Latin America. Everything that's happening now, Tim, is a result of our failure to attend Father. It really is internally, you know? I mean, the micro and the macro is operating all the time. And, you know, it's happening here in the sanctuary with the second king. But before that, during Father's entire course on earth, it's just a record of the micro and the macro. So it really comes down to what we're talking about here, Jim. You know, crossing over the Jordan, staying in Canaan, not fleeing to Egypt, cutting ourselves in half, separating good and evil, draining the evil blood, taking full responsibility, and you know, martyring ourselves internally, giving ourselves internally. That's why, you know, out of my mouth today comes I'm naming names of these family federations. These are our brothers and sisters that we know. You know, everyone has their own responsibility, whether or not those particular guys want to man up or not. That's up to them. But, you know, the point is the man in the mirror, Tim. When I look at myself in the mirror, I ask myself the question every day. And you called me out today. God's calling us out today through Jeremiah. It's the same deal. But you see, the consequences of failure are so much death and suffering and destruction and catastrophe. We're turning it around now. We're turning it around now through our daily life of attendance to the second king here. And attendance, not helping. You know, I didn't come here to help the second king. I came here to attend the second king, to attend the lineage of God through the anointed heir of attendance.
Yes.
That means before meeting the king, I need to make a condition. I need to check myself, divide myself, make a serious condition, and then attend that lineage of God, to allow God's will to be done.
Thank you. In other news, breaking, Trump to remove climate change as a national security threat. This is encouraging news. This article says the Trump administration will reverse course from previous Obama administration policy, eliminating climate change from a list of national security threats. The national security strategy to be released on Monday will emphasize the importance of balancing energy security with economic development and environmental protection, according to a source who has seen the document and shared excerpts of a late draft. Quote, climate policy will continue to shape the global energy system, unquote, a draft of the national security strategy slated to be released on Monday said. Quote, the U.S. leadership is indispensable to countering the anti-growth energy agenda that is detrimental to U.S. economic and energy security threats. Given future global energy demand, much of the developing world will require fossil fuels as well as other forms of energy to power their economies and lift their people out of poverty. President Obama made climate change and the burdensome regulations that accompany its focus a primary focus of his administration, including in his national security strategy released in 2015. We are working toward an ambitious new global climate change agreement to shape standards for prevention, preparedness, and response over the next decade, that report said back in 2015. In some ways, climate change is akin to the problem of terrorism and ISIL, Obama said at a climate talk in Paris in 2015. During a weekly address, Obama said, today, there is no greater threat to our planet than climate change. In September 2016, President Obama released a memorandum requiring federal agencies to consider the effects of climate change in the development of national security-related doctrine, policies, and plans. All of this alarmed critics concerned with more pressing security needs.
So I guess the politicization of the FBI right there.
Yeah.
They put under restriction by the Obama administration to prioritize climate change.
Well, they were politicized. They were made into a leftist organization,
right.
Yes, and becoming a proto-KGB, as the people talking to Bill Gertz have said. Yes. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with more news from a Choni perspective in a minute or so.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
On the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. And just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated. Every child has a dream to belong and be loved. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then they will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these, when we love the least of these. Break our hearts once again.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 16th, 2017. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady here for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Jin-moon. Let's go down some of the headlines on the Fox News front page. Mark Hamill recalls making out like teenagers with Carrie Fisher. We were just talking about going to see Star Wars.
Yeah, okay. I'm excited now.
I don't think that was
Going
on set.
tonight, right, Tim? You and I.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go this evening.
Let's do it.
Female teacher 34 fired after filing for marriage license to wed teen boy student. Kind of what was she thinking type of thing, huh? But that's, wow, that just shows you how the moral relativism has encroached so much into the public school system. U.S. Berkeley regent asked actress if he could hold her breasts. He may step down.
Oh, he stepped down after holding her breast. Did he just ask, or did she let him?
He asked the actress if he could. Well, we haven't read the story, but having done that, he may step down from his. Samurai sword expert performs harakiri and kills self, officials say. Oof. World War II vet dances to celebrate Christmas and his 95th birthday. Newt Gingrich is out with an opinion piece. Republican tax cuts are hit with fake news attacks. Mm. And Suzanne Venker, opinion piece, feminists want women liberated. No wonder they never use the word. And Todd Starn says, Mary takes action when sheep steals baby Jesus in best Christmas pageant ever. Sounds exciting. Why Dems are losing support from many, including me, Eric Reimer. And Tammy Bruce, drain the education swamp. College students' tyranny must be stopped. And Michael Fitz, opinion piece, so we know your kids are drinking and we need your help. And I want to look at a story on Fox about a question. This is by Greg Jarrett, did the FBI and Justice Department plot to clear Hillary Clinton and bring down Trump? There is strong circumstantial evidence that an insidious plot, unprecedented in American history, was hatched within the FBI and the Obama Justice Department to help elect Hillary Clinton and defeat Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election. This relates very much to the World Tribune.com. That's the silent coup article.
Right.
And yeah, this is, we kind of felt this and knew this, but this is more and more evidence of this is coming to light. And when this apparent effort to improperly influence the election did not succeed, see, that's where the collusion took place.
Yeah.
Not between Trump and Russia, but between the Obama Justice Department and the FBI. When this apparent effort to improperly influence the election did not succeed, the suspected conspirators appear to have employed a fraudulent investigation of President Trump in an attempt to undo the election results and remove him as president. Such a Machiavellian scheme would move well beyond what is known as the deep state, a popular reference to government employees who organize in secret to impose their own political views on government policy in defiance of democratically elected leadership. However, this apparent plot to keep Trump from becoming president and to weaken and potentially pave the way for his impeachment with a prolonged, politically motivated investigation, if proven, will constitute something far more nefarious and dangerous. Such a plot would show that partisans within the FBI and the Justice Department, driven by personal animus and a sense of political righteousness, surreptitiously conspired to subvert electoral democracy itself in our country. As of now, we have no proof beyond a reasonable doubt of such a plot, but we have very strong circumstantial evidence. And as the philosopher and writer Henry David Thoreau wrote in his journal in 1850, some circumstantial evidence is very strong as when you find a trout in the milk. Newly revealed text and messages about the apparent anti-Trump plot are the equivalent of a trout in the milk. It smells fishy. The mainstream media and Democrats dismiss talk of an anti-Trump conspiracy by the FBI and Justice Department as right-wing nonsense, paranoid fantasies of Trump supporters with no basis in facts. But there are plenty of facts that lay out a damning case based on circumstantial evidence. Recently disclosed text messages between the FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page suggest there may have been two parts. There may have been two parts of the apparent anti-Trump plot. Part A was to devise a way to exonerate Clinton despite compelling evidence that she committed crimes under the Espionage Act in her mishandling of classified documents on her private email server. Absolving Clinton cleared the way for her to continue her candidacy at a time when all polls and just about every pundit predicted she would be elected president in November 2016. If Clinton had been charged with crimes, she would likely have been forced to drop her candidacy, and if she remained in the race, her candidacy would have been doomed. But Part A of the apparent anti-Trump plot was not enough. A backup plan would be prudent. It seems that Obama Justice Department and FBI conjured up a Part B just in case the first stratagem failed. This would be even more malevolent, manufacturing an alleged crime supposedly committed by Trump where no crime exists in the law. And so, armed with a fictitious justification, a criminal investigation was launched into so-called Trump-Russia collusion. It was always a mythical legal claim, since there is no statute prohibiting foreign nationals from volunteering their services in American political campaigns. More importantly, there was never a scintilla of evidence that Trump collaborated with Russia to influence the election. No matter, the intent may have been to sully the new president while searching for a crime to force him from office. But thanks to the discovery of text messages, circumstantial evidence has been exposed. The text messages exchanged between Strzok and Page, who were romantically involved, confirm a stunning hostility toward Trump, calling him an idiot and loathsome. At the same time, the texts were filled with adoring compliments of Clinton, lauding her nomination and stating she just has to win now. One text between Strzok and Page, dated August 6, 2016, stands out and looks like the proverbial smoking gun. Page, and maybe you're meant to stay where you are because you're meant to protect the country from that menace. This is clearly a reference to a Trump presidency. Strzok, Thanks, and of course I'll try and approach it that way. I can protect our country at many levels. It is reasonable to conclude that Sturzock had already taken steps to protect the quote and quotes the country from what he considered would be a dangerous and harmful Trump presidency. Just 1 month earlier, the then FBI Director James Comey had announced he would recommend that no criminal charges be filed by the Justice Department against Clinton. Given all the incriminating evidence against Clinton, Comey's view that she should not be prosecuted made no sense by any objective standard. Made no sense at all. This is where Sturzock played a pivotal role. As the lead investigator in the Clinton email case, he is the person who changed the critical wording in Comey's description of Clinton's handling of classified material, substituting extreme carelessness for gross negligence. As I explained in an earlier column, this alteration of 2 words had enormous consequences because it allowed Clinton to evade prosecution. This removed the only legal impediment to her election as president. Documents made available by the Senate Homeland Security Committee also show that Comey intended to declare that the sheer volume of classified material on Clinton's server supported the inference that she was grossly negligent, which would constitute criminal conduct. Yet this also was edited out, likely by Sturzock, to avoid finding evidence of crimes. This seems to be what Page and Sturzock meant when they discussed his role as protector of the Republic. It appears that Sturzock was instrumental in clearing Clinton by rewriting Comey's otherwise incriminating findings. Were Page and Sturzock also referring to the investigation of Trump that began in July 2016, right after Clinton was absolved? After all, Sturzock was the agent who reportedly signed the documents launching the Bureau's Trump-Russia probe, and he was a lead investigator in the case before jumping to Robert Mueller's special counsel team. If there's any doubt that Sturzock and Page sought to undermine the democratic process, consider this cryptic text about their insurance policy against the risk of a Trump presidency. Sturzock, I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there is no way he gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy. In the unlikely event you die before you're 40. The reference to Andy is like likely Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who was also supervising the investigation of Clinton's emails at the same time his wife was receiving roughly $675,000 in campaign money in her race for elective office in Virginia from groups aligned with Clinton. What was the insurance policy discussed by Andy's office? Was it the FBI's investigation of Trump and his associates, or was it the anti-Trump dossier that may have been used by the FBI and Justice Department as the basis for a warrant to wiretrap and spy on Trump associates? Perhaps it was both. The dossier was a compendium of largely specious allegations about Trump, compiled by the opposition research firm Fusion GPS. The dossier was funded by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Comey called it salacious and unverified. Various congressional committees suspect the dossier was illegally used to place a Trump campaign associate, Carter Page, under foreign surveillance. When asked about that on Wednesday during a hearing on Capitol Hill, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein refused to answer, which sounds like an implicit yes. Using a dubious, if not phony, document in support of an affidavit to obtain a warrant from a federal judge constituted a fraud upon the court, which is a crime. The dossier scandal recently ensnared Bruce Orr, a top Justice Department official who was demoted last week for concealing his meetings with the men behind the document. Orr's wife worked for Fusion GPS. This created a disqualifying conflict of interest for Mr. Orr. He was legally obliged under Justice Department regulations to recuse himself from the Mueller investigation of Russia's role in the election, but he did not. Congress needs to find out whether the dossier was exploited as a pretext for initiating the Russia probe against President Trump. It would also be unconscionable, if not illegal, for the FBI and Justice Department to use opposition research funded by Clinton's campaign to spy on her opponent or his campaign. Both agencies have been resisting congressional subpoenas and other demands for answers, which smacks of a cover-up. Since the Justice Department cannot be trusted to investigate itself, a second special counsel must be appointed. This new counsel should also reopen the Clinton email case and investigate the conduct of Sturzock, Page, Comey, and others who may have obstructed justice by exonerating Clinton in the face of substantial evidence that she had committed crimes. If Sturzock or anyone else allowed their political views to shape the investigations of either Clinton or Trump and dictate the outcomes, that is a felony for which they should be prosecuted. The Mueller investigation is now so tainted that the appearance of corruption that it has lost credibility and the public's trust. It is very much like a trout in the spoiled milk.
Pretty shocking, eh? All that.
It's a coup. It's a coup. And we've talked about this. We've known that it's been going on, but more and more evidence is coming out, and more people are realizing that this is the case.
Yeah.
More and more people realize that this is the case.
So again, Jeff Sessions needs to step up now and appoint a special prosecutor. And if he doesn't, he should be removed. And I don't know why Rudy Giuliani isn't in there. I heard he has, maybe a lot of personal problems, but someone who's just going to take the heat, Tim. It's all out there. Hannity the other night was talking about all this. Apparently there was a letter that came out recently, a Comey letter, prior to the investigation of Hillary Clinton, saying that we're not going to criminalize Hillary Clinton before they even started the investigation. Yeah,
before she was interviewed. Well, it was after the investigation began, but it was before she was interviewed. The investigation was going on. In fact, it still had a long way to go. Yeah. But Comey actually decided before all the facts were in that we're not going to prosecute this lady, and we're going to exonerate her. So it was pretty obvious that there was collusion among people in the FBI and the Justice Department to try and elect Clinton, and after Trump was elected, to somehow undermine his presidency, and it's still ongoing. So this is something but the fight has to continue, and it's as long as Trump is doing God's will. As long as he is taking America in the direction that God needs it to go, then God will protect him, I'm sure. But if he backs down, if he starts doing what Nixon did, just sort of gives up in the face of externally apparent overwhelming odds, then things will turn very, very bad. Yeah.
Well, it's really important for the disciple. I mean, Trump needs his disciples too. He needs Jeff Sessions to step up. I guess a few congressmen and senators coming forward. You got Nunes and Jim Jordan the other day. It's all exposed. So if Trump's supporters don't act now, then there's nothing more to be said, really. We just have to... the results are going to come down one way or another. And, to step up means, as we know, Tim, one has to sacrifice oneself beyond oneself and put yourself in an uncomfortable position there. So hopefully Mr. Sessions will do that this coming week.
I don't know. We'll have to see. I want to go into this article about Grassley demanding transparency. This is in the publication Politico. Grassley demands answers on FBI officials' texts about Trump. This is published a couple days ago. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, so he's a Republican senator, demanded answers Thursday about when top Department of Justice officials became aware of anti-Donald Trump text messages sent in 2015 and 2016 by top FBI officials, including one senior agent involved in the investigation of any Trump campaign connections to Russia. The limited release of 375 text messages between Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page indicate a highly politicized FBI environment during both the Clinton and Russia investigations, Grassley wrote in a letter to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who appointed Special Counsel Robert Mueller to lead a criminal probe of Russia interference in the 2016 presidential election. Republicans have zoomed in on one August 2016 exchange in which Strzok mentions a conversation in Andy's office, which we just read, which Republicans presume to mean FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. And let's skip over that part that we already read. Grassley asked Rosenstein to provide any additional materials that might shed light on the meaning of that message. In recent public testimony, DOJ officials, including Rosenstein, have declined to divulge more context or details about the significance of the text, deferring to an ongoing Inspector General investigation of the FBI's handling of a 2016 probe of Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. Grassley also pointed to a second text message in which Page says, "We text on that phone when we talk about Hillary because it can't be traced. You were just venting because you feel bad that you're gone so much, but it can't be helped right now." Grassley asked for details about the phone Page referenced. So they had a separate phone that can't be traced. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee have raised alarms about the text messages, though Democrats have downplayed them as acceptable expressions of political viewpoints. They say there's no evidence so far that Strzok or Page acted on their politics to influence investigations related to Clinton or Trump. Republicans, though, have posited that Strzok's central role in both probes could taint the investigations, particularly if he had any interaction with a disputed dossier on Trump connections to Russia. Grassley, the head of the Judiciary Committee, is trying to get the FBI and the Justice Department to release more information about what was going on in connection with those texts. And so in that sense, he's beginning maybe to do something a little bit. Trump has been frustrated until now by the lack of support from Republicans in Congress.
Right.
He's under all this attack, this fake crime investigation attack, and the Republicans in Congress have been sort of sitting back because, of course, they're part of the establishment. They didn't want him in the first place. Maybe they want him to be impeached so that they can get Pence instead.
What we really need to do, Tim, is repeal the Patriot Act. And this where it really goes back to is 9/11.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been fully investigated, the actual fact of 9/11. It just strikes me the television propaganda over the past 15 years. There's this program NCIS. I'm sure you've seen it. Yeah. NCIS. And these SWAT teams and CSI, and it's always this. There's a moment in every episode where the person, the young, clued in, righteous person that wants to protect the republic, quote unquote, which by the way isn't a republic anymore, makes this moral, quote unquote, decision within himself to cross a boundary. Okay, we are going to go after this guy. Okay, we are going to check his emails. And if you notice with NCIS, I happen to be watching it quite a bit with my mom in Boston before coming here.
I haven't seen it in a few years.
NCIS, it crosses the line. Initially it's terrorists, but then it goes to domestic things, and then it's like political things and political diversity things. And
those people who cross the line are held up as heroes in the program.
That's right. They're they're the ones that are smart. They're the ones that are doing the thing, and it's all beyond the pale, and it's all illegal, and it's all what we're looking at here. And the Patriot Act needs to be repealed. That's really what they should be talking about.
All right. Let's take maybe some lighter news this time. Hidden camera in your cruise cabin. How's that?
How would that be? Why would they want to have that? They want to see me peeing in the bathroom, or
a carnival here.
Getting a cup of coffee from my little carafa there in the ship room.
I don't know who. I guess the question is who put it there and for what reason. It's the kind of thing you hear about happening in hotel rooms, changing rooms, and most recently, Airbnb rentals.
Oh, really?
Airbnb rentals have had hidden cameras discovered in them. Yes. We can understand why. I mean,
hidden cameras, probably in the UK. Everything's recorded in the UK, Tim.
I mean, when you rent your house out for an Airbnb, there is always a risk that they're going to come in and trash the place.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can see why there would be a temptation to do this for Airbnb.
Okay, that might be.
Yeah. Okay. It's illegal. Okay. It's illegal. So
sure.
And it's definitely not a good idea for a customer relations point of view either. But I know it has taken place in Airbnb rentals, and now on a Carnival cruise cabin. Who was recording it? That's the question. It's the kind of thing you hear about happening in hotel rooms, changing rooms, and most recently Airbnb rentals. Guests placing cameras inside rooms to secretly record guests for what often are nefarious reasons. Video voyeurism has now gone to sea on a cruise ship. One Florida family claims it found a video camera hidden in the stateroom aboard a 3-night Carnival Cruise Line voyage from Mobile, Alabama to Mexico. The Pensacola couple and their 10-year-old son were searching for dusty areas in their cabin Number is that what you do when you go into a cabin? You search for dusty areas.
Probably.
Number 160
We'll clean it up.
on the Carnival Fantasy. After the father suffered an allergy attack on the second night of their voyage. I see. Okay, that makes sense.
That's
then.
why I looked for the dust, eh?
In the process, they uncovered a small camera hidden in the cables behind their stateroom TV. The father said, the lens was poking out, pointing at the bed. The device, warm to the touch, appeared to have an antenna, indicating it might be transmitting information. The father said. The family has asked to remain anonymous in the event their images were recorded and distributed. The story was first reported by the Miami New Times. Concern was that somebody had been recording, and we've got a child. My main concern is there's video of him online now, and I'll never know, the father told the Miami Herald. I'm also concerned for anybody else who might have stayed in the cabin before us, and anybody else who might be victims and don't realize it. According to the father, the family contacted Carnival security. Onboard crew inspected the device and dismantled it. Video shot by the family shows the father asking a Carnival crew member inspecting the camera whether he wants to put gloves or something on so you can fingerprint it. The crew member's response is not shown. The father was told the camera was equipped with transmitter like those used on drones. He said he spoke to Customs and Border Protection officers at port who said they did not have jurisdiction in the matter, but said he was not informed whether the incident had been reported to Federal Bureau of Investigation or other officials. Hey, the FBI is busy trying to bring down Trump. Why bother them with something like this?
Exactly, yeah. More important business.
Doral-based Carnival confirmed the incident in a statement. Its investigation found the camera was non-working, but it was warm to the touch.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, it's time for us to go off the air. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. The coup, that's ongoing coup that's going on to try and bring down Trump. But the evidence of that coup, it's been going on, but the evidence now is coming out. And that is the encouraging part. That is always noonday sun, noonday sun.
That's right.
And evidence of evil. Evil will be exposed and will be brought down. And we know that Trump is doing that. And he's really doing God's work. Let's pray for him, continue to pray for him, and continue to pray for his family, that they can stand as a strong bulwark against evil and not go to Egypt, not go to Egypt like Nixon did. He needs to stand and fight. And fortunately, he is a fighter. He is a fighter. All right, thank you very much, Ted, for coming in this morning. And thank you, everyone. And God bless, Godspeed, and may his kingdom come.
Adieu.
Adieu.